Hey guys, tonight we're doing something unpleasant. You're going to be a pirate. Not the cool Johnny Depp version that saunters around with eyeliner and witty comebacks, but the historically accurate kind. Smelly, diseased, sunburned, and about one stubbed toe away from crying yourself to sleep in a hammock full of lice. Honestly, you probably won't survive this, but you're here, so we might as well drag you through it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No pressure. Also, where are you watching from? Drop your city and what time it is right now in the comments. I love seeing how weirdly global our little sleepy history crew has become. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It all begins in some seedy coastal town in England, or maybe France or Spain, or the American colonies. You're broke. Like, beyond broke. Your last meal was a piece of bread someone stepped on. You've been sleeping in barrels and dodging recruitment officers for the Navy because, let's face it, nobody wants to be cannon fodder in a wig. Then someone sidles up to you in a tavern. He's got 3 teeth, a hat that smells like eel, and a promise: gold, freedom, and the high seas. You say yes. This is the worst decision of your life. Within days, you're crammed aboard a ship called something absurd like the Bloody Pelican or the Salty Widow. It's not sailing yet, but it already reeks of mildew, wet rope, and desperation. You meet the crew. Half of them look like they died 2 weeks ago and no one's told them. One guy has a bandaged head and no discernible nose. Another smiles at you, revealing blackened gums and a single molar. They all laugh when you stumble aboard because you still have both ears and clean socks. Not for long. Your first lesson? There's no turning back. The moment your boots touch the deck, you're owned. The captain, who may or may not be sober, claps you on the back and assigns you to bilge duty. That's a fancy term for scoop out the disgusting water sloshing around the bottom of the ship. It smells like rotting fish, salt, and human fluids. You're given a bucket and a wink. By sunset, your arms are numb, your back's on fire, and you've ingested enough mystery water to develop a new disease. At night, you're shown where to sleep. It's a swinging canvas hammock 3 feet from another guy's feet, which smell like vinegar and sin. There's no privacy. Not even a tiny bit. When you try to close your eyes, something scurries across your chest. Probably a rat, maybe a ghost. You don't scream because the last guy who screamed got smacked with a belaying pin and hasn't spoken since. Oh, and your clothes. They're not even remotely pirate chic. You're in whatever rags you showed up wearing, and they're already damp. One sleeve has gone missing. Your boots squish with every step and the salt air is already eating the stitching. You look around and realise that no one on this boat has worn clean clothing in years. One man is wearing what appears to be a curtain tied with a belt. Now here's the kicker. The ship hasn't even left the dock yet. You're already exhausted, already questioning everything, and you haven't even seen open water. That comes tomorrow, along with vomiting, sunstroke, and a solid introduction to what it's like to be hunted by the Royal Navy. But we're not there yet. For now, you're trying to sleep, wrapped in a damp wool blanket as someone above you farts audibly, and another crew member starts snoring like a dying walrus. So what is the historical fact for the night? Most pirates weren't ex-adventurers or rebel heroes. They were desperate lower-class sailors who'd already survived hellish lives on merchant or naval ships and figured, why not turn to crime? It can't be worse. Spoiler, it was worse. And your fringe fact? Female pirates existed, and not just in myth. Anne Bonny and Mary Red disguised themselves as men, fought alongside the crew, and were just as savage, if not more. And yes, one of them reportedly stabbed a fellow pirate for being too hesitant in a sword fight. Romantic, right? As for the scholarly debate, no one can agree on what exactly turned the so-called golden age of piracy golden. Was it the influx of skilled sailors after European wars? Was it capitalism on steroids in the New World? Or just a perfect storm of greed, imperialism, and poor hygiene? Historians still squabble about it, usually while sipping tea and judging you for romanticising pirates in the first place. You shift uncomfortably in your hammock, already regretting this life choice. The ship creaks around you. A rat chews something in the corner, hopefully not your boot, and the stars outside glitter like they're laughing. Tomorrow, the voyage begins, and you're not ready. The ship pulls away at dawn, and you're jolted awake by shouting, stomping, and the distinct sound of a goat bleating. Don't ask. You haven't eaten yet. Your mouth feels like it's been stuffed with old rope, and your back is locked in a shape nature never intended. As the harbour fades behind you, and the ship groans its way into the open sea, a fresh scent hits your nose. Fresh, as in new, not clean. Definitely not pleasant. It's a pungent cocktail of tar, mildew, sweat, fish guts, vomit, wet canvas, and something faintly resembling rotting meat. That's the ship's signature smell now. You'll never forget it. It'll live in your nostrils forever. Welcome to your floating home. There's no graceful way to describe the odour that settles in your lungs. It's sticky, physical, a presence. The deck is a greasy patchwork of seawater, mould, and whatever the cook dumped over the side last night. You try not to breathe too deeply, but you also don't want to pass out. One guy warns you, cheerfully, not to sit near the rear of the ship during windless days. That's where the slop bucket lives, basically a shared toilet constantly threatening to tip. This ship has no plumbing, just holes and hope. It's like camping if your campsite was full of aggressive, toothless men and disease vectors. The captain makes an appearance, and it's underwhelming. He's barefoot, hungover, and carrying a mug of something brown and steaming that might be coffee, might be rum, or might be bilge water with an attitude. His hair is a mess of salt-stiff curls, and his coat is stitched together from at least 3 other coats. He scratches himself casually while barking orders at the crew. You notice his left ear is missing. No one explains. Your first real task today is climbing the rigging to help unfurl the sails. You've never climbed anything in your life taller than a flight of stairs. Now you're dangling 100 feet in the air with rope burns on your palms and a guy named One-Eyed Benny below you yelling, "If you fall, don't scream, it spooks the gulls." Funny guy. You slip once, catch yourself, and immediately want to cry. But pirates don't cry. They just make vague threats and develop ulcers. Up there, high in the ropes, you get your first real look at the ocean stretching to every horizon. It's beautiful, in a will definitely kill you kind of way. Deep blue, with rippling ridges and white caps forming under the wind. You're struck by how tiny the ship feels compared to all that water. Like a floating toothpick held together with curses and nails. It creaks and shudders beneath you as it cuts through the waves. The wind is strong enough to make your eyes water, or maybe that's just fear leaking out. By midday, you've been barked at by 6 different men, all of whom seem to have some kind of minor head injury. You're told to scrub the deck, repair a torn sail, and then haul something called a mizzen, which turns out to just be more rope. Rope is your new best friend, and your worst enemy. It tangles around everything, burns your hands, and soaks up seawater like a sponge full of barnacle snot. Lunch is announced with a rusty bell and a yell. You're handed something that was described as stew, but it's really just tepid water with chunks of grey, stringy meat, and floating bits of what might be onion, or maybe fingernail. Everyone slurps it down like it's the finest cuisine. You stare at yours, then glance around and realise you'll starve if you don't adapt. You plug your nose, take a bite, and instantly regret every decision you've made in life. There's a hint of fish, a suggestion of mould, and a bold aftertaste of what even is that. As you eat, the guy next to you pulls out a lump of tobacco and jams it into his cheek. He's missing 3 fingers. He grins at you, and you notice one of his front teeth is made of wood. "Ain't so bad, eh?" he says, drooling slightly. You want to punch him and also cry on his shoulder. The day rolls on, endless and punishing. The sun bakes you from above, the sea sprays you from below, and there's no shade. You're sunburned, dehydrated, and everything you own is wet. Always wet. Even your soul. You try to ask someone how long it'll be before you reach wherever it is you're going. They laugh. No one really knows. The navigation system on board is optimism. There are charts, sure, but they're water-stained and drawn by someone with a shaky hand and a loose definition of coastlines. Here's your historical fact. Pirate ships didn't usually stink just because of poor hygiene, though that was a big part. It was also due to a lack of ventilation below deck. Ships were wooden boxes, and without proper airflow, heat and humidity turned them into mobile compost piles. Some pirates even drilled extra holes in the sides for air, which occasionally backfired when storms rolled in. Your fringe fact. Some pirates brought livestock aboard for meat, milk, or weird company. Goats were common, so were chickens. One documented pirate ship had a monkey that was promoted to powder monkey, though it didn't actually handle gunpowder, just threw things at people. You're not sure if that's a better job than yours. And the scholarly debate of the night, the myth of the democratic pirate ship. You'll often hear that pirate crews were egalitarian, voted on leadership and shared treasure equally. But that wasn't universal. Some ships did operate that way, for survival mostly, but many captains ruled like tyrants, hoarded wealth, and punished disobedience with sudden swimming lessons in shark-infested waters. Historians still argue over how much of the pirate code was real, and how much was just a fantasy invented to make pirates sound more charming than they were. As night approaches, the smell intensifies, if you can believe it. The heat of the day baked the filth into every crevice. The goats are bleating again. You crawl back into your hammock, aching from head to toe, your skin raw from salt and sun. The ship lurches, a wave crashes, and your dreams are interrupted by someone vomiting off the side. You wanted freedom. What you got was the salty widow and an unidentifiable rash on your lower back. Morning doesn't so much arrive as it slaps you in the face with a damp rag. There's no gentle sunrise, no chirping birds, just the jarring bellow of someone shouting, "All hands on deck!" followed by a crash that sounds suspiciously like a bucket being hurled at someone's head. You groan, roll out of your hammock like a half-baked biscuit, and plant your bare feet onto a floor that's cold, sticky and squishy, in places that shouldn't be squishy. Your stomach growls. It wants breakfast. So do you. Badly. You shuffle your way to the galley, which is just a small, smoke-filled corner of the ship near the cooking fire. A blackened metal box that creaks with every wave. The ship's cook, a man named Gristle, hands you a wooden bowl and offers you a crooked grin. His apron is stained with substances that may or may not be edible. You peer into the bowl and find hardtack. Let's talk about hardtack. It's not food, it's punishment. This rock-solid slab of flour and water was baked until every ounce of joy was removed. You knock it against the table and it makes a sound like someone closing a coffin. Don't bite it, Gristle warns. You'll lose a tooth. Suck on it till it softens, or throw it at rats. Works either way. You take a bite anyway. Mistake. Your molar sends a shudder of pain into your skull. It's like chewing drywall. Worse, it's not just bland. It's home to a population of weevils. You stare at the small bugs crawling from the cracks in your biscuit. One of them waves a leg. The older sailors laugh when you gag. Extra protein, someone says. You chew anyway. Pride's not on the menu. Besides, you're starving. The rest of breakfast includes tepid water with suspicious floaties and a smear of something called salt pork, which is mostly fat with a stripe of meat, cured in enough salt to mummify a camel. There are no fruits, no vegetables, no coffee, no joy. Just calories, barely. You try not to think about the fact that your last decent meal was 3 days ago and came out of a bin behind a bakery. As you gnaw your way through the chalky slab of despair, the wind picks up. The sails flap and groan. You hear ropes creak like they're protesting their very existence. Someone yells something about the wind changing and suddenly it's all hands again, this time to adjust sails. You're sent scrambling up the rigging once more, clutching a rope with one hand, and your increasingly frayed sanity with the other. Climbing with a stomach full of weevils is not ideal. Halfway up you burp and something comes up. You swallow it. That's just life now. Once the sails are in place, you're handed a mop and sent to scrub the deck. Again. You ask if you're being punished. No, says a man with a nose shaped like a melted spoon. You're just new. Everyone scrubs until they find a better job, or die great. You dunk your mop in a barrel of seawater and begin sloshing it across the boards, where it does absolutely nothing to clean anything. The filth here is permanent, burned into the wood like regret. Hours pass. The sun climbs high, blinding off the waves. You feel your skin crisping. There's no sunscreen, no shade, not even a hat to shield you. You try fashioning one out of a rag, but it immediately blows away. A gull snatches it mid-air, possibly out of spite. The sun is so strong it starts to cook your hair. Your scalp stings. Your eyes blur. You suck on more hardtack. It tastes like betrayal. Then someone yells, "Fish!" and the crew stirs. A net is thrown overboard and dragged back in with a few unlucky sea creatures flopping helplessly. You're lucky enough to be handed a fishtail. Raw. You stare at it. A man shrugs. Better than hardtack in it. You nibble it and learn that no, it's not. You're starting to feel it. The sluggishness, the soreness in your joints, the fuzziness in your mind. You're not just tired, you're malnourished. Scurvy is coming. You've heard whispers about it. Bleeding gums, swollen legs, teeth falling out like wet cornflakes. You notice an older sailor spitting blood into the sea. He smiles at you. One of his teeth dangles, swinging gently in his mouth like a door on bad hinges. Here's your historical fact of the day. Hardtack, or ship's biscuit, was a staple on ships for centuries, precisely because it lasted forever, sometimes decades. Sailors would break it with hammers, soak it in water or rum and still complain. It was so solid it could crack teeth and so dry it could turn your mouth into a desert, but it didn't rot and that made it valuable. Your quirky fact. Some pirates actually like the weevils in their hardtack. No joke. Insects meant the biscuit was old enough to have softened slightly. Plus, the bugs added texture. That's where you're at now, finding the crunchy bugs more tolerable than the biscuit itself. And tonight's historical debate, the role of nutrition, or lack thereof, in mutinies. Some historians argue that poor diets and chronic illness directly contributed to crew unrest and rebellions at sea. If you're constantly sick, half-starved and forced to eat salted fat and dead bread, you're probably more likely to stab your superior in the neck. Just a thought. By the time dinner rolls around, more salt pork and hardtack surprise, you're considering jumping into the ocean and taking your chances with the sharks. You lie back in your hammock, stomach rumbling, brain foggy, and teeth already starting to feel loose. One of the weevils from your breakfast crawls across your blanket. You flick it off gently. You're starting to relate to it. Small, unwanted, and trapped on this cursed wooden coffin. Outside, the sea swells gently. The ship creaks. Somewhere in the distance, a storm is brewing. You can smell the rain, thick and heavy on the breeze. You know you're not ready for it. But breakfast comes first. More hardtack, always more hardtack. By day 4, you realise something's wrong. Actually, everything's wrong, but now it's your body that's turning against you. You wake up feeling like your bones have been soaked in vinegar. Your joints ache. Your lips are cracked. Your skin's starting to peel in places that shouldn't peel, and there's this deep, aching throb behind your eyes like your brain's been left out in the sun too long. Your gums? They feel squishy. That's not good. Nothing on your face should feel squishy. You glance over at the guy in the hammock next to you, and his mouth is a horror show. His lips are purple, his teeth are gone, and he's got what looks like a small open sore on his cheek. "Morning," he croaks, grinning like a corpse. You try not to scream. You fail a little. He just chuckles. "Don't worry. That's just the scurvy settling in." Scurvy. You've heard the word, sure. Sounds like an annoying rash or maybe a pirate-themed cold. But now you're living it, and it's a full-body betrayal. Turns out, when you don't get vitamin C for weeks on end, your body basically gives up on holding itself together. Gums rot. Teeth loosen and fall. Muscles dissolve like soggy bread. In extreme cases, old wounds reopen. Your body reverts to a state of, "Please stop doing this to me," on a cellular level. Of course, there's no citrus on board, or vegetables, or even clean water if we're being honest. Just endless hardtack, salt pork, and whatever questionable stew Gristle brews up in his cauldron of doom. Some of the older sailors try to convince you that chewing on leather helps. One guy says he saw a man survive on candle wax and seaweed. Another swears by drinking seawater in moderation, which you're pretty sure is a fast track to organ failure. Nobody knows anything. They're just dying slightly slower than you. The smell on the ship is getting worse, and that's saying something. Between infected wounds, rotting food, and the constant waft of bodily functions, the air itself feels hostile. You try to breathe through your mouth, but that doesn't help when the taste of the ship is just as bad, like licking a diseased barnacle. You're assigned to cleaning duty below deck, which is exactly as awful as it sounds. The lower deck is a cramped, dark, airless dungeon. The ceiling is low, you have to stoop, and it's wet, always wet. The walls sweat. Everything drips. You're handed a rag, told to mop up some mysterious leak and left alone with the rats. Yes, plural. You make eye contact with one the size of a loaf of bread. It blinks at you, then waddles away like it owns the place. While you're swabbing, you hear hacking coughs from the sick bay, if you can even call it that. It's more of a corner with some bloody rags and a man who might be dead but no one's checked. You hear moaning. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else just mutters curses. One man begs for orange juice in a pitiful voice, like that'll save him. It won't. Eventually you're called above deck to help rig the cannons. Why? No one tells you. There's no ship on the horizon, no enemy in sight. But apparently the captain had a dream about being attacked by a ghost fleet, and now the cannons need testing. You and two other unlucky fools roll a 600-pound gun into position, swearing and sweating in the sun, while the captain, still barefoot, still possibly drunk, shouts instructions through a telescope he's not even looking through. The test fire is deafening. Your ears ring. Your shirt catches a spark and smoulders. The recoil knocks you backward into a barrel of spoiled pickles, which bursts, covering you in vinegary brine and something unidentifiable but definitely moving. The crew laughs. You try to smile but immediately gag. You will smell like fermented sadness for the next 3 days. Here's your historical fact. Scurvy was one of the deadliest and most common diseases among sailors during the Age of Sail. Entire crews could be wiped out in weeks. British naval ships eventually figured out that citrus, especially limes, could prevent it, hence the nickname limeys for British sailors. But pirates? No such luck. They rarely had fresh anything, let alone magical vitamin-filled fruit. Your quirky fact tonight. Pirates tried all sorts of bizarre remedies for illness. Some believed in wearing charms made of animal teeth. Others drank their own urine. One documented crew tried to treat scurvy by making tea from rusty nails. Yes, iron tea. It didn't work, obviously, but at least they got tetanus to go with their vitamin deficiency. And the scholarly debate, did pirates actually suffer from scurvy as much as naval sailors? Some historians argue that pirate raids on coastal towns and merchant ships meant they had better access to fresh food, at least occasionally. Others point out that pirate crews lived in chaotic, inconsistent conditions and rarely had any real stores of fruit or vegetables. In other words, it depended on the captain, the region, and luck. You have none of the above. By nightfall you're dizzy, your legs are heavy, and your gums are bleeding. You spit into the sea and watch a little streak of red swirl into the water. Someone slaps your back. That's just your body making space for new teeth, they joke. You don't laugh. You just crawl into your hammock, cover your face with a damp rag and dream of oranges. And just to really cap off the night, one of the goats dies, just topples over, no one moves it. It's just there now, stiff-legged and glassy-eyed, lying in the middle of the deck like a reminder that this ship eats everything eventually, man, beast or hope. You wake up to shouting again. You'd think by now you'd be used to it. Voices raised in panic, in anger, in incomprehensible seafaring gibberish. But this time the tone is different, sharper. You sit up in your hammock, bleary-eyed and nearly fall out. The ship is listing slightly, not unusual, but the crew, they're clustered in tense, twitchy groups. A few are staring at something near the helm. You push your way through, heart sinking with every step. The captain is face down on the deck, not moving. Someone finally says it. He's dead. And just like that, the silence breaks. Now this isn't one of those honour his memory moments. There's no mourning, no eulogy, no black armbands or whispered prayers. Within 30 seconds, the deck erupts into chaos. The first mate, who may or may not have been feuding with the captain over a gambling debt involving a pig, immediately claims command. Two other men argue loudly that he once steered the ship into a reef, and another guy shouts, "He drinks his own pee!" which, to be fair, is not that uncommon out here, but still frowned upon in leadership. You, being the newest and most clueless, wisely stay out of it. You drift toward the railing, pretending to check a rope while trying to look unimportant enough not to get stabbed. Pirate leadership isn't handed down through fancy ceremonies. It's seized, sometimes literally. The election process is about as civilized as a tavern brawl. Some pirate crews do vote, if they're feeling democratic that day. Others settle disputes with knife fights, drinking contests, or straight-up threats. This time, it's a shouting match that ends when the first mate fires a pistol into the air and growls, "Any more complaints?" Nobody responds. Partly because he's got a face like a haunted boot, and partly because no one wants to be the next body on the deck. So now, congratulations. Your new captain is a man named Krieg. He's got one eye, a limp, and a beard that looks like it might still be growing something alive. He's also wildly unpredictable. His first order is to turn the ship north because he has a hunch, and his second is to double everyone's rum ration, which temporarily wins the crew over. His third, he throws the dead captain overboard without so much as a goodbye. You watch the body hit the water with a splash. No ceremony, no last words, just a thud, a few bubbles, and gone. The sea takes him without complaint. You're shaken, but no one else seems bothered. "More hammock space," someone jokes. You laugh nervously. That's the thing about pirate life. It's fast, cruel, and nothing's permanent, except the smell. The smell is forever. Craig calls for an inspection. Why? Who knows? Maybe he wants to assert dominance. Maybe he's bored. You're lined up, and he walks past, sniffing people, occasionally jabbing a finger into someone's chest or asking vague questions like, "Do you bleed easy?" When he gets to you, he narrows his one good eye. "You the one with the goat rash?" he asks. You nod. He nods back, satisfied. You're on crow's nest duty. Great, the crow's nest. You climb, again, higher than you want to. The mast sways alarmingly. The platform is small, barely enough room to stand, and smells like bird poop and fear. You cling to the ropes and do your best impression of a lookout, though you have no idea what you're supposed to be looking for. Ships, land, sea monsters. At this point, any of those would be equally terrifying. Hours pass. You see nothing. Just endless rolling ocean. Occasionally, a flying fish breaks the surface, flopping briefly in the air like it's regretting all its life choices, then vanishes again. The sun scorches your back. Your legs cramp. You consider throwing yourself off just to get out of duty, but then remember that Crag would probably just make the goat do it in your place. Down below, the crew is restless. The extra rum has kicked in, someone starts singing, someone else throws up, a game of dice turns into a wrestling match. Crag lounges in the captain's chair, drinking from a jug that looks suspiciously like it used to hold lamp oil. The ship veers slightly off course as he yells something about fortune's favour and trusting the wind. You try to trust the wind. The wind doesn't care. Here's your historical fact of the night. Many pirate captains were elected, at least early in the voyage. Crews valued leadership but hated tyranny, and captains who failed to bring loot or keep the crew fed were often voted out, or more accurately tossed overboard with rocks in their pockets. It wasn't just mutiny for fun, it was survival. Your quirky fact. Some pirate crews had rules about everything, from bedtime to fighting. One infamous code forbade gambling on board, required lights out by 8, and fined anyone who brought women or boys on board without permission. Pirates, the original HOA, and the scholarly debate. Historians still argue over just how much authority a pirate captain really had. Was he a dictator? A figurehead? A glorified party planner with a sword? Depends on the ship. Some captains ruled like monarchs, others like camp councillors with weapons. Crag, clearly, falls into the drunken chaos goblin category. Night falls. You're finally allowed to climb down from the crow's nest. Your legs jelly, your back aching. Crag is asleep in the helm, snoring loudly. Someone has drawn a moustache on his moustache. You lie down in your hammock and close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come easy. Not because of the discomfort or the goat stink or even the scurvy slowly melting your face, but because now you understand something critical. There are no rules here, no safety nets. One moment you're mopping decks, the next your leader is face down in a puddle of grog, and you're following orders from a man who talks to his own foot. This isn't an adventure, it's barely survival, and there's no way out. You don't remember falling asleep, but you definitely remember waking up. It's like the ship itself shook you awake, rattling your bones with a sudden lurch. Your hammock swings violently, dumping you half onto the floor. You catch yourself just before smacking your head against a barrel. The sound outside is different this morning. Not the usual low groans of wood and wind, but a constant barrage of shouted orders, boots hammering the deck and the metallic scream of chains. When you stumble above deck, the world is chaos. The skies are harsh metallic grey, clouds stacked on clouds like a wall. The sea heaves and rolls, slamming the ship up and down like it's a toy. You grab the nearest rope to stay upright, but it's slick with rain and salt spray. Your hands burn instantly from the friction. You blink against the stinging mist and realise, with a sinking gut, what's happening. Storm. This isn't the gentle cinematic storm of movies, with dramatic lightning and rousing music. This is a living thing, a black screaming beast that wants you dead personally. The wind shrieks in your ears, tearing at the sails, pulling at your clothes like greedy fingers. The waves rise taller than houses, then crash down on the deck with the weight of falling stone. Water floods your boots. Your body is already soaked to the bone and the day's barely begun. Someone screams your name. At least you think it's your name. You turn to see a coil of rope tossed toward you. "Secure the starboard rigging," a voice bellows. You don't know which side that is. You just run where they point, tripping over a loose plank and landing knee first in a puddle of salt water. Your hands shake as you fumble with the knot, your fingers too cold to work properly. Another wave crashes over the deck, knocking you onto your back. The world tilts sideways. You scramble up again, coughing seawater. The smell has changed. Even through the storm, the stench of the ship lingers. Sour sweat, bilge water, vomit. But now it's mixed with the acrid tang of gunpowder from a soaked barrel and the unmistakable scent of fear. Pirates aren't fearless. Not at sea. Not in this. Half the crew looks ready to pray, the other half looks ready to drink. The captain, Craig, your one-eyed chaos goblin of a leader, appears at the helm bellowing something about riding the beast while clutching the wheel like it's a lover. His hair whips around his face, his coat plastered to his body. He looks like a deranged sea god, except he's definitely mortal and possibly drunk. "Reef the main, secure the gun ports, get that blasted goat carcass off the deck," he shouts. No one moves the goat carcass. It's become part of the ship now. You drag yourself toward the main mast. The sails above you are snapping, cracking like whips in the wind. Another crewman, a teenager with hollow eyes and no eyebrows, climbs beside you, his lips blue. "If it tears, we're dead," he mutters and keeps climbing. You don't ask what happens if he tears. Higher and higher you go, your body screaming at you to stop. The ropes are like frozen snakes under your fingers, slick and biting. The mast sways so violently you're sure it's about to break. The sea below is a swirling black-green nightmare, waves capped with white like gnashing teeth. You cling to the yardarm, your knuckles white, and reach for the sail. It flaps wildly, threatening to fling you into oblivion. You bite your lip until it bleeds and keep working. Somehow you and the other boy manage to reef the sail halfway. The ship steadies, slightly, but then a fresh gust hits, and a crack splits the air. The mast below you groans, a sound like a dying animal. "Move," someone shouts from below. You don't think. You just slide down the rigging like your hands are made of rope burns and terror. You hit the deck hard, breath knocked out of you. Another wave crashes over, tossing a barrel past your head. The storm doesn't stop. Hours blur together in a cycle of hauling, tying, slipping and gasping for air. Your muscles feel like torn rope, your nails split, your lips taste of blood and salt. You can't tell where the rain ends and your tears begin. Finally, mercifully, the wind begins to die. The waves shrink from mountains to hills. The rain slackens to a drizzle. The sky still churns above, but it's lighter now, streaked with dirty gold where the sun tries to break through. The ship limps forward, battered but afloat. You collapse against a railing, trembling. Around you the crew is silent, exhausted, soaked. One man is missing. You don't ask where he went. Another is lying on the deck, coughing up seawater, his leg bent at a wrong angle. Crag wipes his mouth with the back of his hand and yells, "See? She likes us," gesturing at the ship as if the storm were a test of loyalty you just passed. You resist the urge to throw your hardtack at him. Here's your historical fact tonight. Storms were among the deadliest dangers for pirates, not just because of drowning, but because wooden ships were fragile. A broken mast, a torn sail, or a breached hull could strand a crew hundreds of miles from land with no hope of rescue. More pirate ships were lost to weather than to battle. Your quirky fact? Some pirates believed storms were curses cast by witches or vengeful ghosts. They'd throw offerings, coins, rum, even animals, overboard to appease the sea. One infamous crew sacrificed their only chicken mid-storm, then starved for a week. You think of the goat and decide maybe they're onto something. And tonight's scholarly debate: did pirate crews have better survival rates in storms than Navy ships? Some argue yes. Pirates were leaner, faster, and less encumbered by heavy cargo. Others argue no. Pirates lacked the discipline and resources of naval crews. Either way, the ocean didn't care. It was equal opportunity murder. You stagger back to your hammock that night, clothes still dripping. Your body is beyond sore, it's numb. You stare at the dark ceiling, listening to the creak of wet wood and the soft whimper of someone crying nearby. You realise you're lucky to be alive, and unlucky enough to have to keep living this way. You wake up soaked in your own sweat, though whether it's fever or humidity you're not entirely sure. The storm is over, but the ocean hasn't forgiven you yet. The sea is calm, yes, but it's not peaceful. It's the kind of calm that feels like a setup. The air is thick and hot, smothering you like a wet blanket left in the sun too long. Everything sticks to everything. Your shirt to your back, your tongue to your teeth, your sanity to the edge of a cliff. The ship creaks quietly, exhausted. So are you. The good news? You survived a full-blown ocean storm. The bad news? You've earned a new job. You're now a topside assistant. That's pirate speak for, we're out of people, and you're not dead yet. Your first duty of the day is to help scrub cannon barrels, in the sun, with a broken brush and a bucket of brine that smells like pickled sadness. You sit there, sweating from places you didn't know could sweat, scrubbing metal while salt crystallizes on your skin like you're turning into jerky. Crag stomps by, somehow louder than necessary. "Hot enough to boil your eyeballs today, eh?" he says cheerfully, drinking from a flask he never seems to refill. His beard has new birds nesting in it. Maybe just one. But you don't ask. You never ask Craig anything. You just nod and keep scrubbing like your life depends on it. Because it does. The heat is unbearable. There's no wind. The sails hang limp like soggy sheets. Below deck it's worse. Like crawling into a steaming coffin. The air is so thick it feels like you're chewing on soup. You watch the older crew members move like ghosts, barely able to lift their boots. One collapses into a corner and doesn't get up for a long time. No one checks on him. Soon, people start to whisper the word fever. The sick bay, or again the area of blood-soaked rags and regret, fills fast. It's not just scurvy anymore. It's heat stroke, infection, and something worse. A crewman's leg wound from the storm has turned purple and swollen. Another man is coughing up blood, muttering nonsense. Someone else tries to climb the rigging, naked, shouting that he's becoming the sky. Crag knocks him out with a bucket and shouts, "No more sky talk," as if that'll fix anything. You do your best to avoid the sick, but the ship is small and the air doesn't care who's infected. You cover your mouth with a scrap of cloth, damp it with seawater, and pretend it's helping. You think about fresh air, cool breezes, clean sheets. You think about death too, but only because it sounds less sweaty. At midday, Gristle tries to pass off something called sea stew. It's water again, but this time with suspicious stringy bits of what might have once been crab, or rat, or part of the goat. No one asks. You take a bite, gag, and force it down because hunger is louder than disgust now. The guy next to you tries to trade his stew for rum. He's missing 2 fingers and seems confused about where he is. As the sun climbs higher, the deck turns into a frying pan. The boards burn your feet through your boots. Someone tries to throw up over the side and collapses halfway. Crag orders everyone to swab the heat off the deck, which doesn't even make sense, but no one questions him anymore. You swab. The water dries before it hits the wood. Then the ocean plays its favourite game. Surprise. The calm ends, not with a storm, not with an enemy ship, but with a gust. A single, sudden gust of wind that sends the sails flapping and ropes whipping. Everyone freezes. Then Crag laughs like a lunatic and yells, "She breathes again!" The crew springs into action, pulling ropes, adjusting sails, shouting commands with more energy than you've seen in days. You stumble to help, hands blistered and trembling, but the wind is real. The ship moves again. You feel it beneath your feet. The subtle shift from bobbing corpse to a living thing. The sails tighten. The wheel creaks. The ship cuts through the water once more. And for a moment, just a tiny sliver of time, you feel something you haven't felt since the moment you climbed aboard. Hope. Of course, that lasts about 10 minutes before a fight breaks out over a tin mug of water. A real brawl. 2 men, both shirtless, soaked in sweat, swinging at each other with what little strength they have left. One headbutts the other, blood sprays. The crowd cheers. Crag watches from his perch and doesn't intervene. Eventually one man collapses wheezing, and the other grabs the mug, drinks half, then pours the rest down his pants. You wish you were kidding. Here's your historical fact tonight. Tropical heat was one of the most brutal killers on long voyages. Ships turned into ovens. Dehydration, heat stroke, and ship's fever, likely typhus or some mix of mosquito-borne horrors, ravaged crews. The heat weakened immune systems, and in a place where disease already thrived, that was a death sentence. Your quirky fact. Some pirates believed in sweat rituals to chase away illness. They'd build a fire below deck, yes, on a wooden ship, and sit around it wrapped in blankets to sweat out disease. Unsurprisingly, this often ended with fire, suffocation, or everyone just being even sicker and much sweatier. And tonight's scholarly debate. How much did tropical climate influence the decline of piracy? Some argue that the heat, disease, and environmental toll made it impossible to sustain pirate republics in places like Nassau. Others point to British naval crackdowns and economic shifts, probably both. But the heat, that definitely didn't help anyone live longer. That night you lie in your hammock, shirt clinging to your chest, sweat pooling in the curve of your spine. You can hear the fevered mumbling of sick crewmen echoing through the ship. Someone whimpers. Someone else sings a lullaby in a language you don't understand. You close your eyes, and your dreams are strange, full of fire, endless deserts, and teeth falling from your mouth like coins. The breeze outside keeps blowing. The ship rocks gently. You might live through the night, or not. Either way, tomorrow's coming, and you can already feel it. Another day in this miserable floating purgatory. You wake up to the smell of rum and blood. Again. At this point, you're not sure if it's coming from outside your hammock or from you. There's a mysterious ache running down your left side, and your foot feels like someone tried to unscrew it during the night. When you sit up, the ship groans beneath you like it's exhausted. And honestly, same. Outside, the sky is cloudless and glaring. Everything is lit with that blinding sun-bleached glow that makes even the sea look annoyed. You emerge onto the deck, eyes squinting, mouth dry, and immediately wish you hadn't. There's a crowd near the centre-mast, and that's never a good sign. Crowds mean one of two things: someone's died, or someone's about to. Today it's both. One of the crew, young, maybe 17, sits on a crate, pale and trembling. His leg is wrapped in a crusty old rag, and the bottom half is turning black. Not bruised black, rotten black, gangrene. You don't need to be a doctor to know that's a bad sign. Fortunately, or unfortunately, you do have a ship's surgeon on board, or at least someone who calls himself one. Meet the ship's doctor, a man named Sawbones Jim. He has no formal training, no medical supplies to speak of, and a knife collection that belongs in a nightmare. His qualifications. He once dissected a whale and didn't cry. That's it. That's the resume. Time to do a bit of carpentry, Jim mutters cheerfully as he rolls up his sleeves, revealing forearms covered in tattoos and possibly blood. The crew clears space. The patient starts crying. Crag strolls over with a mug of rum and dumps it into the boy's mouth. "Drink up, lad," he says. "Don't want you remembering this." You try to walk away, you really do, but Craig spots you and points. "You?" Bucket duty. Your stomach drops. Bucket duty, as it turns out, is not what it sounds like. Or rather, it's exactly what it sounds like. You hold the bucket, under the stump. Jim sharpens his bone saw against a whetstone while humming. The boy is strapped to the crate. Everyone watches. No one offers help, just mutters bets on whether the kid will survive. When the sawing starts, it's slow, deliberate, and unimaginably loud. The sound of steel grinding through bone is something you'll never unhear. The screaming? Also unforgettable. The blood hits your hands in hot spurts, and you nearly drop the bucket. The leg comes off, eventually. The boy passes out. Someone throws a sheet over him like that'll help. Jim sews up what's left with thick twine. The stump looks awful. Not just fresh wound. Awful. Pirate ship medicine awful. You can already see it swelling. Infection isn't a matter of if, it's how fast. Later you try to eat. It doesn't go well. Gristle has prepared something he calls bone broth, which given the morning's activities makes you gag. You skip the meal. Instead, you sit near the edge of the ship, staring at the horizon, trying not to think about the smell of blood or the sound of that saw. You'd give anything for a real doctor, a clean hospital, a glass of water that hasn't been stored in a barrel that once held fish. You look down at your own hands, blistered, shaking, stained, and wonder how much longer your body will hold out. A splinter could kill you out here. A sneeze might start a chain reaction. Everything feels like it's one step from disaster. Here's your historical fact. Most pirate ships did have someone acting as a surgeon, but they were rarely trained. The best were former naval doctors who defected. The worst were literally just whoever didn't flinch at blood. Tools were unsterilised. Anesthesia was a mix of rum and biting something wooden. Survival was not great. Your quirky fact. Some surgeons believed that blowing smoke into a patient's rectum could revive them after near drowning. It's true. They even had long tobacco pipe kits for it. It didn't work, obviously, but that didn't stop them from trying. Suddenly the bonesaw seems almost merciful. And tonight's scholarly debate: did pirates actually treat injuries better than navies? It's argued that pirates, weirdly enough, had better post-op survival rates sometimes, because they weren't under strict hierarchies and could rest more after injury. Others say that's nonsense, and any advantage was pure luck. Either way, the average pirate didn't die in glorious battle. They died from infected blisters and poorly executed amputations. By late afternoon, the boy's breathing is shallow. No one looks hopeful. Cragg tells a story about a man who lived another decade with only one leg, before falling off a dock and drowning because he forgot he couldn't swim. It's meant to be funny. No one laughs. You finish your shift by scrubbing the deck where the surgery happened. There's still blood. Always blood. You ask Jim if it bothers him. He shrugs. We all rot different ways, he says, then goes back to sharpening something unnecessarily long and curved. That night, the boy dies. Quietly. You hear someone say it like it's weather news. Aye, the lad's gone. His body's wrapped in canvas, tied with rope, and unceremoniously dumped into the sea. No prayer, no music, just a splash and silence. The ocean swallows him. You lie awake, rocking gently in your hammock, listening to the ship breathe. You feel phantom pain in your leg. Not the missing one, the still attached one. It's just your mind playing tricks. Probably. You can't tell anymore. You think about all the ways you might die out here. Storms, starvation, infection, madness. And every one of them feels probable. The ship creaks, the rats scamper. Somewhere above, Cragg sings a lullaby to the moon in a voice that's almost tender. And you? You close your eyes and whisper a silent plea to whatever might be listening. Not tonight. Not yet. You wake up with a rat sitting on your chest. Not metaphorically, literally. It's just there, grooming itself like it owns the place, looking you dead in the eyes with that casual, beady-eyed arrogance that only rats and royalty seem to pull off. You stare at it, frozen, hoping maybe it'll lose interest or spontaneously combust. It does neither. It simply stretches, yawns, and finally scampers off your body and into a crack in the wall, leaving a wet spot on your shirt that you really hope is just condensation. This is your life now. You climb out of your hammock, wiping rat footprints off your chest and try to stretch. Your back cracks in at least 3 different directions and you wince. Everything hurts. Your hands are raw. Your knees ache. Your gums are still bleeding, and you're now reasonably sure you have lice. Actually, you're certain. One of them waved at you from your sleeve yesterday. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is more hardtack. This one's especially crunchy. You bite into it and feel something crack. Not the biscuit, your tooth. You spit out a little bloody shard and just stare at it. No one around you even reacts. A guy next to you is using his hardtack to hammer a nail into the deck. You lock eyes, and he shrugs. Multi-purpose, he says, chewing on a strip of salt pork that might just be leather. There's no coffee, no tea, not even a scrap of dried fruit. You ask Gristle if there's any fresh water left, and he laughs so hard he starts coughing. Aye, he chokes out. We're always running low. But drink fast before it gets the worms again. You sip anyway. The water tastes like old socks soaked in fish juice. Something wiggles at the bottom of your cup. You pour it overboard and pretend you didn't see anything. The task today is rat patrol. That's not an exaggeration, it's an actual duty. The rat problem has gotten so bad that Cragg finally noticed when one of them chewed through the leather grip on his pistol. Now it's all hands on rat duty, which means crawling through the tightest, darkest parts of the ship with a lantern, a stick, and the deeply unsettling knowledge that you are never alone. You squeeze through narrow corridors below deck, shoulders scraping against damp wood, eyes scanning for twitchy movement. The smell down here is indescribable. A thick stew of mould, urine, mildew, old rope, and something you can only describe as ship rot. You spot your first rat behind a barrel. It stares at you, offended, like you're the one in the wrong. You swing your stick, miss. It scampers over your boot and vanishes. You scream. Quietly. You end up spending 2 hours in the dark with nothing to show for it, but scratches on your hands and the growing suspicion that the rats are smarter than the crew. One of them literally darted past with something shiny in its mouth, possibly a button from Cragg's coat. You report back to the deck and lie about how many you got. Everyone does. Cragg doesn't care. The worst part is sleeping. Again. Always. There's no privacy. Your hammock sags, slightly damp, and smells like old feet. The guy above you has night terrors. He screams about sea spiders at least twice a night. The guy next to you snores like a malfunctioning accordion. Someone else hums lullabies in Spanish until they fall asleep. You haven't had 8 hours of rest since you boarded. And now, the rats. The rats are always there. You hear them scuttling through the walls, scrabbling over barrels, chewing through anything soft. One of them pooped in your boot last night. You found it the hard way. You tried to clean it with a rag and seawater, but now the boot just smells like salted poop. You wear it anyway. There are no spares. Your historical fact for tonight? Rats were a plague on ships. They chewed through sails, food stores, ropes, and clothing. They spread disease, especially the terrifying kind, like typhus and the plague. Some ships brought cats on board to help control the population. Others tried setting traps. Most gave up and accepted that rats were part of the crew. Your quirky fact? Rats weren't always seen as bad luck. Some sailors believed that if rats were seen abandoning a ship before a voyage, it was a sign that the ship was doomed to sink. Others treated ship rats like pets, naming them and feeding them crumbs. One infamous pirate had a rat named Pickle he claimed was his lucky charm. Pickle allegedly survived 3 sinkings. And tonight's debate: did pirates have worse rat problems than navy ships? Some historians argue yes. Pirate ships were more crowded, less clean, and carried more random loot for rats to nest in. Others say no, naval ships were just as filthy, and the only difference was whether anyone cared enough to do something about it. On your ship, no one cares. After the rat patrol, you try to relax. You sit near the bow, watching the sea churn. It's a calm day, no storms, no enemy sails, just endless waves, and a sky that feels too big. You almost feel peaceful, until a rat walks directly across your boot, dragging what looks like a tooth. You sigh. Back below deck, Gristle is cooking dinner. You smell it before you see it. Burnt, fishy, and somehow still sour. He proudly serves a stew with chunks that bounce. You ask what's in it. He says, "Not rat," which is not a comfort. You force yourself to eat anyway because hunger wins. Always. Your teeth hurt, your stomach growls, your body's breaking down, and you're not even halfway through this nightmare. You try not to think about it, about the rats, about the smell, about the screaming above you. That night, just before you drift off, you hear something by your ear. Tiny claws, close. You freeze. You don't move. The rat nest is in your hammock ropes now. You know it. You feel it. You close your eyes and mutter a prayer, not for safety, not for treasure, but just for one night without something crawling across your face. You don't get it. You wake up to shouting. Again. Not the usual pull that rope or swab that deck shouting. This is sharper, angrier, the kind of yelling that means somebody's about to get hurt. You crawl out of your hammock half dazed and immediately step into a puddle of something you don't want to identify. The smell of salt, sweat and mildew punches you in the face. Then you hear it, the crack of a whip. You scramble up the ladder to the deck, blinking into harsh sunlight, and freeze. A man is tied to the mast, his shirt ripped open, his back striped with raw, bleeding welts. Craig stands a few feet away, one hand on his hip, the other holding a short, knotted rope. He's smiling. Not a happy smile, but the tight-lipped smirk of someone enjoying his own power. Around him, the crew watches in a loose circle, silent, like it's a show they've seen 1,000 times. The man tied up, big, scarred, probably in his 40s, is accused of stealing rum. You don't know if he did or not. You don't think anyone does. Doesn't matter. Crag announces the punishment, 10 lashes. The man snarls something back and Crag changes it to 20, just like that, because he can. You feel a rush of heat rise in your face. You want to look away. You don't. You can't. The first lash cracks through the air like a pistol shot, and the man jerks against the ropes. The second draws blood. By the 5th, he's silent. By the 10th, he's shaking. By the 20th, he's slumped forward, barely conscious. Crag tosses the rope aside and walks off, bored. 2 sailors untie the man and dump him on the deck like trash. No one moves to help. You force yourself not to throw up. This is the ship's discipline. No trial, no explanation, just pain. You're learning quickly. On a pirate ship, freedom is a myth. The code everyone talks about. It's only real if the captain feels like it that day. Otherwise, it's just another piece of paper to wipe his hands with. You start to realize how fragile everything is. How easily a look, A word or a rumour can get you whipped, or worse. Later, as the sun climbs higher, you're sent to swab the deck where the punishment happened. The blood's still there, glistening darkly in the cracks between the planks. The wood is hot from the sun, and the smell is thick, iron and salt and sweat. You scrub until your hands ache. It never fully comes out. It never does. At midday, Krieg strolls by, humming, sipping from his flask. He doesn't even glance at you. You hear two sailors whispering nearby about mutiny. Not loud enough for Craig to hear, but loud enough for you to catch the words. Too far, next port, knife in his sleep. You pretend you didn't hear it and scrub harder. Lunch is another round of stew, but you can't eat much. Your stomach's a knot. The man who was whipped lies curled near the rail, breathing shallowly. Someone gives him a rag to bite on. Someone else pours a splash of rum on his back and calls it medicine. You know it's not. In the afternoon, the mood on deck is brittle. The crew avoids eye contact, speaking in murmurs. The laughter and dice games have stopped. Even the rats are quieter. You feel like you're walking on the edge of something sharp. Crag seems oblivious. Or maybe he isn't. Maybe he knows exactly what he's doing, keeping everyone afraid and off balance. You get ordered to clean a pistol. It's rusted, sticky, and smells faintly of old blood. You work the cloth over the metal, thinking about what you just saw, thinking about how easily it could be you next time. You remember the man with the saw, the boy with the stump, the rats, the scurvy. It all blurs together into one simple thought. You're trapped. Here's your historical fact. Pirate ships did have codes, sometimes elaborate ones, that spelled out punishments for various offences. Stealing from the crew, breaking rules, or deserting could lead to flogging, marooning, or death. But unlike the romanticised idea of a democratic ship, these punishments were often arbitrary, especially under brutal captains. Your quirky fact. Some ships use bizarre punishments instead of flogging. One code allowed captains to shave a man's head, tar it, and then pour feathers on it. A humiliating, sticky mess. Another involved keel hauling, where a man was dragged under the ship's hull scraping against barnacles. Most didn't survive it. And tonight's scholarly debate. Did pirate codes make life fairer or just codify cruelty? Some historians argue they were revolutionary, offering rights and profit-sharing unheard of in the Navy. Others point out that the same codes gave captains legal cover to maim, whip, or kill without real accountability. Freedom with a leash is still a leash. By dusk, the man who was whipped dies quietly. No one says his name. His body's wrapped in canvas, tied with a bit of rope and tossed overboard. You don't even flinch this time. The splash is just part of the rhythm now. That night you lie in your hammock, the memory of the whip cracks echoing in your head. You stare at the dark wood above you, at the faint glow of lantern lights swinging with the ship's motion. You know this life isn't just miserable, it's unstable. All it takes is one bad day, one angry captain, one false accusation, and you're next. You pull your blanket tighter and listen to the rats in the walls. They sound almost like laughter. Morning drags in like a wounded dog, slow and ugly. The air smells different. Thicker, wetter, sour in a way you can't place. You roll out of your hammock, knees popping like bad joints in a puppet, and make your usual mistake, breathing through your nose. Big regret. The stench that greets you is a vicious combination of unwashed bodies, spoiled meat, mildew, and something floral that might be perfume or just rotting fruit. It's hard to tell anymore. The whole ship smells like it's decomposing in slow motion. But today there's something new in the air. Land. A shout rings out from the crow's nest. Sail ho! Land to the east. The crew stirs, and not in the frantic, panicked way they do when a navy ship appears or someone yells fire. No, this is the rare, almost giddy kind of movement that comes when a break from the sea might actually be on the table. You shuffle out onto the deck, shielding your eyes, and there it is. A low green smudge on the horizon. Trees, palm trees, actual dirt. You can practically smell the mouldy rum already. Crag makes the call before anyone has a chance to complain. Shore leave. We'll resupply, trade, and maybe steal a few things if the locals are slow. Everyone cheers, even the ones who can barely stand. You feel a flutter of relief. Actual land. Maybe you'll get some fresh food. Maybe you'll find soap. Maybe you'll stop bleeding from your gums for 5 minutes. You don't even care where it is. At this point, any landmass without a mast is paradise. As the island gets closer, the ship slows. Crag bellows something about watching for reefs. You notice a change in the sea. It's calmer, warmer, but tinged with that silty brown that means you're sailing over shallows. The hull creaks. The breeze carries the smell of damp earth, salt, and something a little off. Sweet. Foul. Familiar. The kind of smell that doesn't belong in the ocean. Something human. You drop anchor offshore and take one of the longboats in. It's a rough ride. Shallow waves smacking the hull, oars creaking, some idiot trying to sing and getting slapped for it. You stumble onto shore and immediately collapse onto the sand, which feels like luxury bedding compared to the ship. It's hot, gritty, alive with ants, but you could cry with gratitude. You're on land. You don't even care that you've just set foot on what is, historically speaking, probably one of the worst places for a pirate to be. A disease-ridden, parasite-infested tropical cesspool. The locals don't seem thrilled to see you. A handful of them watch from the tree line, eyes suspicious, weapons casual but present. Crag waves at them like he's old friends with the jungle. "We're just here for rum and fruit," he shouts, "and maybe a few smiles." It's unclear whether he means smiles or bribes or something worse. Either way, a few of the locals drift out and begin the barter dance. You're sent into the port town to help haul water. It's not really a town, more like a cluster of huts and one crumbling fort with a flag you don't recognise. The air buzzes with mosquitoes the size of walnuts. The well is filthy, the barrels are mouldy, and a man nearby is vomiting into a ditch. Still, it smells better than the ship. Barely. Gristle disappears into a bar, or what passes for one, and comes out with 2 bottles of what he insists is rum. You take a sip. It's brown, oily, and tastes like fermented boot polish. You drink it anyway. Everyone does. It burns on the way down, but it numbs the weird ache in your ribs, so you count that as a win. Later you're given a coin pouch and told to buy fruit. Fruit. Actual fruit. You stagger toward the market like it's a holy pilgrimage, already dreaming of oranges, mangoes, maybe even a banana. You find a stall with shriveled papayas and a few questionable limes. The seller eyes you like, you're planning to bite him. You trade 2 coins for a handful of withered citrus and 1 slightly bruised guava. You eat half the lime right there. Your body doesn't know how to react. Your gums tingle. You're pretty sure this is what joy feels like. You get back to the boat before sundown. You're itchy, sunburned, and somehow already have 2 new bug bites on your neck. But your stomach has real food in it, and for a moment, just a fleeting, impossible moment, you feel like you might survive this. Of course, the next morning half the crew is vomiting, somebody caught something. Maybe from the food, maybe from the water, maybe from that one guy who wandered off into the jungle and came back bleeding from his ears. Who knows? The sickness spreads fast. People drop where they stand. The deck becomes a patchwork of puke and fever-slick sweat. The air smells like hot garbage and stomach acid. Crag declares it's just a minor adjustment to the climate. He opens a barrel of limes and tells everyone to chew one. Cures everything, he says. It doesn't. You spend the day helping move the sick to the lower deck. Bad idea. It's hotter down there and there's no airflow. One man tries to leap overboard mid-fever. Another thinks his foot is a rat and tries to chew it off. You find Gristle curled under a tarp, shaking and whispering about a woman named Myrtle, who may or may not exist. You don't feel sick yet. Just tired. So tired. Your stomach rumbles. Your joints ache. But then again, they always ache. It's hard to tell what's normal anymore. Here's your historical fact. Many ports in the Caribbean and West Indies were absolute hotbeds of disease during the golden age of piracy. Pirates, desperate for supplies and rest, often risked more in shore leave than in battle. Yellow fever, malaria, dysentery, just a few of the local greetings. Your quirky fact. Some pirates believed sleeping with a local woman would strengthen the blood and protect them from illness. This was not based on science. It was based on wishful thinking and a complete misunderstanding of how bodies work. Many pirates died thinking they were doing preventative medicine, and your scholarly debate. Did port towns help or harm pirate crews in the long run? On one hand, they offered food, water, and escape from the sea. On the other, they spread disease, drained morale, and often served as traps for law enforcement. Historians go back and forth. Pirates mostly went because they were desperate, or because they were drunk. That night you lie in your hammock again, clutching a half-eaten lime like it's a holy relic. Your stomach gurgles, your skin itches. The man in the hammock beside you isn't breathing. No one says anything. He's just left there. The ship creaks. The rats scurry. You whisper to yourself, "At least it wasn't me. Not tonight." You wake up to silence, which is more terrifying than shouting. No one's yelling, no one's coughing, not even the rats are squeaking. You lie there for a moment, wrapped in your damp hammock, waiting for something to break the stillness. Then you realise what it is. Too many people are dead. You sit up slowly, trying not to make noise. The air is heavy, swollen with humidity and the stench of sickness. Below deck smells like a mixture of sour meat, wet rope, and a hot, wet outhouse after a festival. It sticks in your throat like a bad decision. You swing your legs over the side and your boots hit something soft. You look down. A body, still warm. You stare at it for a second, too numb to be shocked. Then you step over it. You don't know his name. You're not even sure if he made it onto the crew before or after you. All you know is he died in the same hammock he's been rotting in for 2 days, and no one had the energy or the nerve to move him. Not yet. Up on deck, the sun is beating down like it's trying to finish the job the disease started. The sky's bright, the ocean calm, and the ship drifts slowly, aimlessly. There's no wind. The sails hang limp. The crew is even limper. Craig's nowhere to be seen. That's not a good sign. You spot Gristle curled under an overturned bucket, wheezing. Someone else is trying to bait a hook with a piece of what looks suspiciously like rat meat. A group of sailors sit in a circle, passing around a pipe and muttering about signs and omens. One of them thinks the ship is cursed. The others argue that it was cursed before they even left port. Then someone calls out, "We got treasure." You blink. Treasure. You stumble over to the port side just in time to see a small, soggy crate being hauled up from the hold. A few crewmen, suspiciously lively for how sick everyone's supposed to be, are grinning. They've broken into one of the cargo stores. It's a mix of looted junk, old clothes, dented goblets, a small silver mirror, a brass candlestick, and several crates of what they insist are spices. You recognise at least one as powdered bone. Delicious. The excitement spreads like fever. Pirates are basically overgrown children when it comes to loot. Show them a locked box and they'll chew through it like termites with trust issues. Soon there's a full-blown rummage sale on deck. Someone puts the silver mirror in their hat and declares themselves the fashion admiral. Another is wearing 3 belts and no pants. You stare at a cracked porcelain doll head and wonder who thought this was treasure. The truth is, most pirate treasure wasn't gold or jewels. It was junk. Real, honest junk. Stolen silks that were already mildewed, bolts of cloth crawling with moths, crates of coffee beans that had been soaked in seawater and fermented into something that could strip paint. But when you've spent weeks eating salt pork and sleeping beside the dead, even a shiny spoon feels like victory. And here it is, your historical fact. Actual pirate booty was rarely the chests of gold people imagine. Most pirate hauls included barrels of food, clothing, tools, weapons, and alcohol. The occasional score of coin or precious metal was rare and often blown in a matter of days. What pirates really valued was stuff. Anything that could be sold, traded, worn, or burned. Your quirky fact. There are records of pirates looting books and using the pages as toilet paper. In one raid, they stole an entire printing press and used it to make fake currency, love poems, and at least one crude joke newsletter called the Floating Foulmouth. Treasure is what you make it, and the scholarly debate, the romantic myth of buried pirate treasure, is probably nonsense, aside from the infamous Captain Kidd, who may or may not have buried a stash somewhere in the Americas. There's little real evidence that pirates buried anything. Why would they? Money was for spending. Most pirates didn't live long enough to plan for the future. Their retirement plan was die sooner. Back on deck, someone waves a rusted necklace in the air and yells, "I'm rich!" before immediately falling into a pile of old blankets and passing out. No one helps him up. You pocket a small copper coin with a square hole in the middle. You're not even sure which country it came from, or if it's real. But you hold on to it. Not because it's valuable, but because it's something. Something you can grip when your teeth feel like they're about to fall out or your legs go numb from scurvy-induced nerve rot. The rest of the day is weirdly festive. Feverish energy spreads. People dance. Someone plays a tin whistle with 3 holes. The stench of death is still here, but it's shoved into the background by manic distraction. You hear laughter for the first time in days. It sounds wrong, hollow, like it's echoing up from the bottom of the sea. As the sun sets, a group of crewmen start burning some of the mouldy loot. Old books, a broken harp, half a painting of what might have been a goat in a wig. The flames crackle, and the smoke is rich and greasy. You watch it rise and wonder if the ship itself is laughing at you. That night, Crag finally reappears. He stumbles up from below deck, shirtless, wild-eyed, covered in old ink and newer blood. "I wrestled a fever demon," he announces to no one in particular. "I won." Then he climbs into the rigging and sleeps there like a bird. Nobody questions it. You lie in your hammock, the copper coin clutched in your palm, and stare up at the swaying shadows above. Below, the ship holds its breath. You think about treasure, about what it means out here. Not gold, not jewels, just the ability to wake up tomorrow, not be the body under someone's boot, and maybe chew a lime without your teeth falling out. That's the real loot. Surviving, you wake up to cannon fire, is not a dream. You don't even have dreams anymore, just brief episodes of unconsciousness interrupted by rats and gun pain. This is real. The ship is shaking, the deck is thundering overhead, and someone is screaming the words "battle stations," like you're in the Navy or anyone here has a clue what they're doing. You lurch out of your hammock, barefoot, half-dressed, and slam your head into the beam above you. Welcome to pirate combat. By the time you claw your way up to the deck, the situation is clear. There's another ship on the horizon, closing fast. Big sails, clean rigging, and a fresh coat of paint, which already tells you three things. They're faster, better armed, and probably smell better. You squint through the smoke and haze and see the shape of a naval frigate, those elegant, soulless killers of the sea. Your heart sinks. It's like bringing a soup spoon to a gunfight. Crag is already shouting orders. He's wearing his coat backward and has 2 pistols tucked into his belt, one of which is still smoking. "You rats know the drill," he bellows. "Board or be boarded." The crew scrambles to load cannons, uncoil ropes, and look busy. You're handed a rusted cutlass and pushed toward the railing. The blade is chipped. The handle is sticky. It smells faintly of cheese. You try not to think about it. The ship rocks violently as the first cannonball hits, splintering the stern and sending a rain of wood shards across the deck. A man next to you screams, partly from fear, partly because a piece of mast just removed part of his ear. Blood sprays. You duck, instinct taking over. Another boom follows, and the whole ship shudders like it's trying to shake you off. You're ordered to run powder to the cannons, which sounds easy until you realise it means sprinting back and forth across the deck, carrying sacks of black powder while dodging cannon fire and slippery puddles of whatever bodily fluids are currently pooling near your boots. The noise is overwhelming. Cannon blasts, shouts, the creak of the hull, the whistling of incoming fire. One cannon misfires and explodes, taking half a man with it. The rest of the crew barely reacts. As the ships draw closer, the air fills with smoke, screams, and flying debris. The other vessel is sleek, deadly, and frighteningly organised. You can see their crew lining up with muskets, uniforms clean, and buttons shiny. One of them is probably named Sebastian or Archibald. You hate him already. Crag yells, "Grappling hooks! Get ready to swing!" And that's when it hits you. You're about to board a ship full of well-armed, possibly sober naval officers. You, a scurvy-riddled sea hobo with lice and one working boot, are going into melee combat with trained professionals. You're definitely going to die. Ropes fly, hooks catch. The ships slam together with a shuddering crunch that nearly throws you overboard. Someone yells, "Go!" And then you're leaping across the gap with the grace of a terrified chicken, blade raised, mouth open in what may or may not be a battle cry. You land hard, roll across the deck of the other ship, and immediately get kicked in the ribs by a man in a powdered wig. Combat is chaos. Screams, smoke, gunfire, steel on steel. You swing your cutlass wildly, hitting someone's shoulder, maybe. Blood sprays. A man swings at you with a sabre and misses by inches. You duck, slip on something wet, hopefully rum, possibly intestine, and crash into a barrel. You pull yourself up and see Crag swinging a broken pistol like a club, cackling, blood on his teeth. It's not elegant, it's not choreographed. It's a brawl in a floating alleyway, and you're just trying not to die. You jab at anything in uniform, dodge anything that looks sharp, and try not to vomit from the adrenaline. The sounds are deafening. Screams, metal, splashes as men fall into the sea. Eventually you look around and realise you're winning, or at least not losing. The naval ship's crew is retreating, their decks slick with blood and bodies. Some jump overboard, others throw down their weapons. Krug stands on a pile of crates, roaring triumphantly. "Another glorious day at sea," he bellows. Then he promptly falls off the crate and lies there laughing. You've survived your first ship battle. Your arms are shaking, your clothes are torn, your face is streaked with soot and blood, mostly not yours. You sit on a crate and exhale, chest heaving. Around you, the crew begins looting. Not efficiently, like children at a birthday party grabbing anything shiny. Someone finds a bottle of wine and passes it around. Someone else is dragging a ham leg the size of a cannon. Here's your historical fact. Most pirate battles were short, brutal affairs. Few pirates wanted a long fight. Too risky. They aimed to shock and overwhelm their enemies quickly, often using terror tactics like screaming, waving flags and lighting fuses in their beards. Pirates didn't want a fair fight. They wanted a fast one. Your quirky fact. Blackbeard used to tie slow-burning fuses into his beard and light them before boarding ships, creating a smoke-wreathed figure of absolute chaos. It worked. Most sailors surrendered before he even swung a sword. The goal wasn't to fight, it was to frighten. And your scholarly debate? Were pirate ships actually more successful than naval ones in combat? Some argue yes. Pirates were more motivated, had more experience, and operated with terrifying efficiency. Others say no. Navy ships were better armed, better trained, and better supported. Most likely, pirates won by surprise. If a fight dragged on too long, they usually lost. That night you sleep on the naval ship, now stripped and commandeered. Your hammock is slightly cleaner. You eat real food from their galley. Cheese, apples, bread that doesn't crack your molars. You almost cry over a slice of soft real cheese. Someone brings you a blanket that doesn't smell like goat. You close your eyes and feel for just one moment victorious. Alive. Maybe even a little proud. You fought. You survived. You even stole a clean shirt from a dead officer named Barnaby or Franklin or something equally punchable. You might not die tomorrow, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. You wake up feeling suspiciously comfortable. That's your first warning. The hammock isn't sagging quite as much. The air isn't thick with the usual notes of wet wood, mildew and old socks. For the first time in weeks, there's no rat curled up on your chest. You sit up slowly, expecting to find something horribly wrong, like your leg missing or Crag dancing in a wedding dress. But instead, everything's just quiet. Too quiet. You glance around. The crew is scattered between the two ships, the captured Navy frigate and your barely floating trash barge. The vibe is strange, unsettled. The battle's over, but instead of celebrating, everyone's acting twitchy, whispering in corners, watching each other like dogs eyeing the same bone, and you know exactly why. Loot. Or, more specifically, the share. See, now that you've successfully committed high seas robbery and murder, there's a little matter of who gets what. The captured ship came with real treasure, actual silver coins, sealed crates of military-grade gunpowder, and a few suspiciously ornate chests that definitely didn't belong to the Navy. You saw one sailor open a box and cry softly over the sight of fresh boots. Fresh boots. And now the pirate code comes into play, or at least the idea of it. Crag naturally declares he's owed a captain's share, which, in his math, equals about half of everything. "I guided us through storm and slaughter," he proclaims, standing dramatically on a crate. "Without me, you'd all be fish food with fashionable jackets." The crew mostly grumbles, but no one challenges him. Yet. The rest of the loot is supposed to be divided fairly among the crew. That's how pirate democracy supposedly works, right? Equal shares, voted decisions, camaraderie through crime. But the more you watch, the more you realise it's less democracy, and more a game of who can lie, cheat and backstab the most without getting thrown overboard. You see two crewmates arguing over a single silver spoon. One accuses the other of hoarding, the other accuses him of hiding jewellery in his pants. Craig solves the issue by taking the spoon for himself. Another fight breaks out over a powder horn, then over a pair of boots, then over a hat. You almost get stabbed just walking past someone who thinks you're eyeing their coat. It's a full-on pirate free-for-all. You hang back and watch the madness unfold. A group of sailors starts keeping inventory, badly. They can't read, so they're drawing pictures of what they find. Coins, cups, something that might be a cat or a cannonball. Someone else declares he's the new quartermaster and is immediately punched in the face. Gristle tries to organise a vote but ends up passed out with a chicken on his lap. No one brought the chicken, no one knows where it came from. You see a few crew members sneak off with sacks of silver, hiding them in the water barrels or stuffing them into hollowed-out planks. You know it's only a matter of time before someone gets caught and the real fun begins. Which brings us to your historical fact. The pirate code did exist, and in some cases, it was followed. Pirate captains were often elected, and shares were divided based on rank. Captains and quartermasters got larger cuts, while regular sailors got smaller but still meaningful amounts. Injuries were compensated. Lose an eye, get more coin. But the code varied wildly from ship to ship, and enforcement was often flexible, your quirky fact. Some pirates swore oaths on strange things, crossbones, bloody daggers, even mouldy bread, to uphold their version of the code. Others had written codes they made each new crew member sign, like a twisted version of a company handbook. One pirate even made his men swear loyalty while standing barefoot on a dead man's chest. Practical? Number. Theatrical? Absolutely. And your scholarly debate. How democratic were pirate ships, really? Some historians say they were the early prototypes of worker-run collectives. Captains could be voted out, loot shared fairly, and decisions made communally. Others argue this was the exception, not the rule, and most pirate ships operated under the illusion of fairness, while actually being run like floating dictatorships. Sound familiar? By sunset, tension has reached a deliciously dangerous level. Crag is clearly drunk and increasingly paranoid. He starts accusing people of traitorous math, and demands someone recount the shares. Someone else claims Crag took the good boots. Crag denies it, even though he's clearly wearing them, and they're 2 sizes too small. His toes are definitely turning purple. Then someone mentions mutiny. Not loudly, just a whisper, barely audible, but it's enough. Crag freezes mid-rant. The entire deck goes still. You could hear a weevil sneeze. Crag slowly draws one of his pistols, the one he calls Susan, and fires it into the air. "Anyone feeling brave tonight?" he asks, voice low, smiling just a bit too wide. No one answers. Not out loud anyway. You lie awake that night, curled in your slightly less revolting hammock, the sound of gold coins clinking and rats chewing echoing through the ship. Your mind spins with possibilities. Take your share and sneak off at the next port. Try to rally the others to vote Crag out. Steal Susan and pitch her overboard. You still have the little copper coin you pocketed days ago. It's worthless. Probably. But it's yours. And right now, ownership of anything feels like power. But power on this ship is a volatile thing. One cracked deckboard away from a dagger in the back, or a night swim with lead boots. Tomorrow might bring a vote or a coup, or just a mysterious accident involving a barrel of gunpowder and an unfortunate misunderstanding. Pirate democracy, where the only thing fair is the likelihood of betrayal. You wake up choking on smoke. It isn't fire, not yet, but the smell hits your lungs like a slap. Sulphur, burnt oil, old canvas. You cough, sit up, and swing out of your hammock just in time to see a pale, frantic crewman stumble past, shirt half on, face streaked with soot. You follow him up the ladder, heart hammering, half convinced the ship is finally going down in a blaze of poorly thought out choices. Turns out it's just mutiny. Well, attempted mutiny. You burst onto the deck into a scene so chaotic it actually takes you a second to process it. The sky's still black, just nudging into dawn, but the deck is lit with scattered torches and broken lanterns. Shadows leap across the sails like ghosts at war, and in the middle of it all, Craig, barefoot, shirtless, blood on his chest, laughing like this is the best birthday party he's ever had. 3 crewmen lie sprawled near the mainmast. One's groaning, clutching his side. One isn't moving at all. The third is trying to crawl away, muttering something about "didn't mean it" and "wrong barrel." Around them, the rest of the crew stands in a loose, uncomfortable ring. No one's helping, no one's intervening, they're just watching. Crag has his pistol drawn. Not Susan, the other one, which he's charmingly named Baby Crag. He waves it in one hand and a machete in the other, spinning a slow circle like he's doing pirate ballet. 3 worms in the apple, he says, voice hoarse. Rotting from the inside. Thought I wouldn't notice, eh? No one speaks. He kicks the closest mutineer in the ribs. The man coughs blood. Crag smiles. This one, he says, pointing with the machete. Tried to light the powder magazine. Did you know that? He chuckles. Would have sent us all to Neptune's kneecaps. You feel a chill crawl up your back. That explains the smoke. It also explains the new scorch mark near the lower deck hatch. You glance around and realise something important. The mutiny wasn't a plan. It was a panic. A clumsy, desperate lurch toward survival. Some poor souls thought they could end Crag before he ended them. Problem is, they underestimated two things. How alert a man can be when he sleeps with one eye open, and how fast Craig is with a blade. What follows is a punishment so swift and raw, it barely feels real. Crag orders the groaning man tied to the mast, hands bound above his head. The one who tried to crawl away is gagged and thrown in a barrel. The third, unmoving, gets wrapped in canvas without ceremony and heaved over the side. Splash. Gone. No prayer, no silence, just an angry grunt and a wet thunk. The barrel man gets rolled around the deck for a bit, each push punctuated by a crewman muttering some half-hearted insult. Eventually Crag stops the game and has the barrel nailed shut. Let him think about trust, he says. We'll let him out when we reach port. Or not. A few nervous laughs trickle out. You don't join them. The mood on the ship changes instantly. It's not fear anymore. It's something colder, quieter, resigned. The kind of silence people wear like a cloak when they realise no one is coming to save them. Crag orders rum poured. To the survivors, he says, raising a cup. The loyal, the clever, the still breathing people drink. Not because they're celebrating, but because there's nothing else to do. You take your cup and sip without tasting. Your hands are trembling, but you keep them steady. You've learned the art of pretending everything's fine. Everyone here has. Here's your historical fact. Pirate mutinies were more common than movies suggest, but they rarely succeeded. The moment a crew tried to overthrow a captain, everything got fragile. Discipline vanished. Loyalty fractured. Most mutinies ended in blood, or in a compromise that only delayed the inevitable. Your quirky fact. Some pirate ships had a designated talker, a charismatic crewman whose job was to keep tensions down. He'd tell jokes, calm disputes, and, if necessary, distract the captain with wild stories, kind of like a therapist who could also knife you if you stepped out of line. And the scholarly debate, was mutiny more frequent under brutal captains or during hard voyages? Historians argue both sides. Some say cruel leadership always breeds rebellion. Others point to long stretches at sea, starvation, or failed raids as the real triggers. Either way, mutiny was less about justice, more about desperation, and usually it didn't end well. By midday everything is scrubbed clean, blood wiped, smoke gone. The deck smells of rum, sweat, and quiet dread. The man tied to the mast is still there, alive, barely. Crag ignores him. The crew ignores him. You try to, but it's hard not to notice the way he twitches every few minutes like he's falling in a dream he can't wake from. You're told to keep watch in the crow's nest. Fine by you. Up there at least you're alone. No laughter, no knives, no Crag. Just wind, endless sea, and the illusion of distance from everything horrible below. You climb, legs aching, splinters digging into your palms. The platform sways slightly, and you settle in with your spyglass. Nothing but horizon. The sky's flat and grey, the water oily and slow. You scan in lazy arcs, not really looking, just giving your hands something to do. Then, out of nowhere, a thought hits you. You almost missed the mutiny. If you'd slept 5 minutes longer, you'd have woken up in smoke and fire, possibly already dead. If it had succeeded, you'd have been tied up or tossed overboard, or forced to pick sides you weren't ready for. You realise how little control you have, how paper-thin your role is. You're not important, you're not safe, you're just still breathing. That night you stay in the crow's nest long after your shift ends. No one calls you down, no one notices. Below, the ship moves through the dark like a ghost. You watch Crag's silhouette pacing the deck. He sings sometimes, talks to his boots. His madness isn't getting worse, it's just getting comfortable. And you wrap your blanket tighter around your shoulders and decide quietly to start hiding things. A bit of rope here, a knife in your boot, a crumb of food behind the sailcloth, just in case. Because this ship doesn't belong to anyone anymore. It just hasn't figured that out yet. You wake up with an eye patch on your face. Not because you lost an eye. No, you'd remember that. It's just there. Someone must have tied it on as a joke while you slept in the crow's nest. Or maybe you did it yourself out of sheer delirium. Either way, it smells like fish, and it's stained with something you're 80% sure is grease, and 20% sure is human. You take it off, toss it overboard, and vow to never play into pirate stereotypes again. But the stereotypes, oh, They're everywhere now. The ship's become a caricature of itself. Crag has started walking with an exaggerated limp, even though he hurt his leg weeks ago, and it clearly healed. He leans into it now, like he's trying to convince everyone he's more pirate. He's also taken to lighting matches just to stick them into his beard and snuff them out dramatically, muttering things like, "Blackbeard ain't got nothing on me." The beard smells like bacon and regret. You're pretty sure it's also infested. Half the crew has started talking in what they think is pirate speech. It's awful. Ah, this, me hearty, that. One guy, new, eager, probably concussed, insists on calling himself Dagger Pete, even though his only dagger is a butter knife he found in the Navy ship's galley. He tucked it into his belt like it's a holy relic. Every time he draws it, people pretend not to laugh. It's easier than explaining irony. You're not sure when the cliché started bleeding into reality. It's like everyone snapped under the pressure of boredom, fear, and saltwater-induced brain rot. Instead of fighting it, they embraced the myth. You see peg legs now, actual ones, carved poorly, strapped onto stumps with rope and optimism. Eye patches, worn for fashion, not necessity. Parrots? One guy bought a parrot during shore leave. It immediately bit him, and hasn't stopped screaming profanities since. Fittingly, it's named Captain Suckbeak. It's also stupid, and yet somehow it works. The more ridiculous the crew gets, the more functional things become. There's less fighting, less tension. Everyone's role is clearer when you're play-acting a fantasy. The cook becomes Old Greasy Bill, the lookout becomes Skull-Eyed Benny, and even Gristle starts wearing a chef's hat made from a gutted pillow. Crag, now fully committed to the bit, declares every Wednesday to be Rum and Revenge Day, which is exactly like every other day except louder. There's even a treasure map now. Not a real one. A joke, drawn in coal on an old sailcloth. It points to places on the ship itself. X marks the barrel of stale onions. Beware the bilge beast, and buried beneath the hammock of a man who snores like doom. It circulates through the crew, passed around like a bedtime story. People laugh. People smile. It's horrifying. You start wondering, are they pretending to survive? Or surviving by pretending? Because the ship itself, it's falling apart. The deck is rotting in patches. The rigging sags. The sails are patched with every colour of cloth imaginable. Red, blue, floral, even one with a duck embroidered on it. Krieg calls it the flag of madness. Honestly, it fits. Here's your historical fact. Pirate clichés, the eye patches, peg legs, parrots, aren't entirely fiction, but they're wildly exaggerated. Pirates did sometimes lose limbs in battle, and parrots were exotic pets brought back from tropical raids, but these weren't universal. The image we know today was largely shaped by 18th and 19th century novels, especially Treasure Island, which turned messy history into marketing gold. Your quirky fact. The phrase "walking the plank" almost never happened in real pirate history. It's theatrical nonsense. Most captains preferred quicker, less dramatic methods for execution. But it caught on in literature and eventually film, becoming one of the most iconic pirate tropes, despite being almost entirely fabricated. And tonight's scholarly debate. Did pirates create their own mythos? Or was it all written afterward by the landlubbers? Some argue that pirates leaned into performance. They wore flamboyant clothes, renamed themselves, and crafted legends to scare their enemies. Others say it was all stitched together later by writers and newspapers, eager to turn brutal criminals into swashbuckling anti-heroes. The truth is probably both. Pirates knew the power of fear, and nothing's scarier than a lunatic in a feathered hat waving a sword and laughing. Back below deck, you patch your hammock with a scrap of stolen velvet and find a single gold button in the folds. You keep it. You've got a growing stash now. A copper coin, a dice carved from bone, half a comb, and now this button. Useless, really, but they're yours, your own treasures, absurd as they are. Everyone's collecting something now. Trinkets, myths, identities. You lie there that night listening to someone poorly play a concertina, wheezing out a sad sea shanty while Captain Suckbeak screams, "Idiot!" in the background. The ship creaks. The waves lap. Someone tells a story about a ghost ship with sails made of skin, but no one even pretends to be scared. They've heard worse. They've lived worse. You close your eyes and try to remember who you were before this. You can't. Not clearly. Your name feels like something left behind on a dock, traded for salt and stories. You're not a person anymore. You're a role, a pirate. Not the kind who finds treasure, the kind who survives long enough to rot. The real horror, you're getting good at it. The next morning, Crag calls a meeting. That's a sentence you should never hear on a pirate ship. Meetings are for mutinies, executions, or very bad ideas disguised as brilliant plans. You stand near the back of the group, arms crossed, trying to stay inconspicuous, which is difficult when everyone else looks equally guilty and sunburned. Crag stands on a barrel, his coat flapping dramatically in the wind despite the fact there is no wind. His boots are mismatched, again, and his beard has new beads woven in, one of which may be a tooth. You don't ask, you never ask. "Brothers and sisters," he begins, voice hoarse from rum or shouting or both. "We've crossed oceans, defied storms, and spat in the eye of the Navy. And what have we got to show for it?" There's a beat of silence. Then someone in the crowd mutters, "Fleas." Craig ignores it. "We've got loot. We've got freedom. And now..." He pauses dramatically, pulling something from behind his back. A small wooden chest, clearly looted from the Navy ship. He slams it down. The lock's already been pried off, the lid cracked. He opens it. Inside is a pathetic handful of coins, silver mostly, along with a few rings, a medal, and what might be a dried fig. Crag gestures with both arms like he's just revealed the Ark of the Covenant. "This is our share," he says proudly, "divided fair and square." You stare at the chest. You could maybe buy a goat with that. A sick goat. Maybe one with a limp and a gambling addiction. The crew collectively shifts, eyes narrowing. You can feel the mood souring like milk left in the sun. You hear mutters, "That's it? Where's the rest? Thought there was more." Because here's the thing. You all saw what was on that naval frigate. Chests, crates, locked compartments, wine, silk, silver. And now Crag is claiming this is what's left. After all the blood, the sleepless nights, the dysentery. No one says it, but everyone's thinking it. He kept the good stuff. You watch as Crag closes the chest and announces, "So, everyone gets their fair share, except the usual bonuses for command, of course. A captain's got responsibilities." He looks at the quartermaster, if you can still call him that since Craig's been ignoring him for weeks, and nods. Quartermaster doesn't move, doesn't blink. Something's coming. But before anything explodes, Crag claps his hands and says, "Distributions begin tonight. Meanwhile, back to work." And just like that, the crowd dissolves. Grumbling, confused, angry, but not ready. Not yet. Later that day, your share arrives in the form of a small pouch. You open it and dump the contents into your palm. 3 silver coins, 1 button, not even gold, and a piece of coral shaped vaguely like a foot. You stare at it. You look at the quartermaster. He shrugs. "This is your payment. For risking your life, burying crewmates, fighting off the Navy, surviving storms, scurvy, and at least one goat-related trauma. You're holding enough money to buy a bad loaf of bread and maybe a second-hand sock. You feel nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a dull kind of understanding. You finally get it. The real pirate curse isn't the gallows or cannonballs or cursed treasure. It's being paid in lies. Here's your historical fact. Pirate shares were a core part of how crews were motivated. Unlike naval vessels, where sailors were often underpaid and overworked, pirate crews had systems for dividing loot. Theoretically, captains often received 2 or more shares. Quartermasters got 1.5, regular crew got 1. But there were always exceptions. Always someone skimming off the top. Your quirky fact? Some pirates invented their own currency. On rare occasions, crews stamped their initials into looted coins or used marked objects as temporary tender on board. One captain even tried to start a pirate bank, which lasted exactly 3 weeks before someone set it on fire. And tonight's scholarly debate. Were pirate pay systems more equitable than naval systems, or just more chaotic? Some historians argue that the promise of equal loot was revolutionary, proto-communist even. Others point out that the system only worked when loot was plentiful and trust was high. Once suspicion crept in, the whole fragile economy collapsed. The collapse is coming. You can feel it in the silence that follows the coin distribution. No laughter, no drinking, just chewing, thinking. You catch glimpses of whispered conversations, knives being sharpened too slowly, eyes darting to the captain's quarters. You don't say anything. You just walk to the rail, stare out at the endless blue, and try to remember what real money looks like. You used to think pirate treasure meant gold and jewels, ships groaning with riches. Now it's a coral foot and a coin with a bite mark. You turn the coin over in your hand. It's got a hole punched through it. Not a fancy one, just a crude dent from some angry moment in the past. You wonder who punched it, and whether they were just as disappointed as you are. You tuck it into your pocket with the rest of your sad little hoard. Somewhere below deck, someone's shouting about how they saw Crag hide a chest behind the water barrels. Somewhere else, two men are arguing over whether a map drawn in grease pencil leads to treasure, or just to where the rats nest. You don't care. Not anymore. The fantasy is over. You've seen the reality, and the reality is this. The treasure's gone. The dream's dead, and the only thing you're rich in now is calluses, regret, and a deep, unshakable hatred of Crag's stupid hat. You're lost. Not just you, personally. Though yes, emotionally, spiritually, you've been adrift for quite some time. But the ship, the actual physical ship, somewhere between the failed loot distribution and Crag's new obsession with wearing two belts for balance. Someone forgot to keep track of where you were going. You're not on a course anymore. You're just floating. This realization hits slowly, like a leak in the hull. At first, it's small signs. No birds overhead, no familiar stars at night, no sight of land in days. The sun burns hotter than usual, and the horizon remains stubbornly empty in every direction. Crag keeps insisting you're headed toward a port of great riches, but won't say which one. Probably because it doesn't exist. Probably because he made it up. Navigation duties used to fall to a man named Elias, a quiet, sharp-eyed sailor with a weathered sextant and a deep respect for stars. But Elias got food poisoning from a suspicious stew last week, had a prophetic fever dream about the moon blinking, and hasn't spoken since. Now he spends his days lying under the aft stairs, rocking gently, whispering nautical facts to a tin cup. Crag declared this a promotion. Elias is now the ship's astral whisperer, which is not a job. With no real navigator, you're stuck with guesses and vibes. The compass swings lazily like it's bored. The maps are soaked, torn, or drawn by people who thought north was a suggestion. Crag uses his gut to steer, which is concerning because his gut is filled with rum, salted meat, and decades of bad decisions. Every day you see more of the same. Ocean, clouds, an occasional flying fish committing mid-air suicide. The crew gets quieter. Gristle stops serving meals and starts handing out meal experiences, which is just stale hardtack presented on fancy scraps of sailcloth. The water barrels grow lighter. The last lime has turned into a tiny green fossil. Even the rats look anxious. Tension builds. You hear it in the way people breathe, in the creak of every plank, in the arguments about whether you've passed this same cloud 3 times already. Crag still struts around like nothing's wrong, quoting sea poems and occasionally trying to spear passing jellyfish with a fork. No one's laughing anymore. Eventually someone finally asks the question out loud. Where are we? You don't know who says it. Maybe Dagger Pete. Maybe the guy with one boot and a tattoo of a turnip. But the words crack the silence like thunder. Everyone stops. Crag freezes mid-monologue, the fork still in his hand, his eyes narrow. We're exactly where we're meant to be, he says. Then, for emphasis, he points at the sea and adds, there. No one responds. He walks away. Later you overhear a few sailors whispering about taking over the navigation. Can't be worse, one mutters. Another suggests drawing straws. A third points out none of them can read a map. You offer, cautiously, that you once saw someone use a quadrant in a book. Everyone stares at you like you've just recited witchcraft. You shut up. That night, you're on watch. Alone, up in the crow's nest, watching the stars. Or trying to. Clouds have rolled in, fat and low and glowing with moonlight. The sky is a smeared silver. You squint, hoping for something familiar. The North Star, a constellation, a passing god. Nothing. Just clouds and wind and the slow, steady ache of being very far from anywhere. You remember stories of sailors who lost their way and just kept drifting, circling the same patch of ocean until madness bloomed like barnacles in their minds. You wonder if that's happening here. You wouldn't know. You already live on a boat where a man talks to shoes and another thinks his wooden leg is haunted. Here's your historical fact. Navigation during the so-called golden age of piracy was more guesswork than science. Yes, they had compasses, charts and instruments like astrolabes and cross-staffs, but many pirates lacked the training to use them properly. Most relied on coastal landmarks, dead reckoning, and, when all else failed, chasing merchant ships and hoping they were going somewhere useful. Your quirky fact. Some pirates hired captured navigators to help steer their ships. These reluctant experts were often treated well, at least until they became expendable. One unlucky navigator reportedly faked being bad at his job just to avoid being forced into pirate service. It worked until the crew sailed directly into a reef. He did not survive. And the scholarly debate, did pirate ships really get lost this often? Some records suggest they were surprisingly well travelled, hopping between known ports and using hidden coves as refueling stops. Others argue that without steady supply lines or reliable charts, pirates often drifted for weeks, burning through resources and morale. Being lost was part of the lifestyle. Back on deck, Crag starts making up landmarks. That cloud? That's the Whispering Monk. Means we're close. The sea smells like copper. We're near gold. I feel it in my bones. We'll hit land within the week. He said that for the past 2 weeks. The crew starts marking time not by days but by crag lies. 1 crag lie equals 1 false promise of land. You're up to 14. Someone starts carving notches in a plank. The parrot mutters, still lost, at random intervals. And yet, despite everything, the ship floats. You haven't sunk, haven't been caught, haven't even died from starvation. Yet. You chew your hardtack. You drink your weird, metallic-tasting water. You sleep in your sagging hammock and dream of fields, bread, and the sensation of walking on something that doesn't shift beneath your feet. Tomorrow, you'll wake up in the same place, because there is no place, just endless blue. But you'll get up anyway. You'll climb the rigging. You'll scrub the deck. You'll chase the myth of forward motion, because even when you're completely undeniably lost, you still have to pretend you're going somewhere. Otherwise, what's left? You don't even flinch when the lookout screams. By now, screaming is just part of the background music. Waves, creaking wood, muttering crew, random bird noises, and someone hollering bloody murder from the crow's nest. But this time, it's different. There's a tone to it, sharper, thinner, like fear that's finally bloomed into panic. You look up and see the lookout pointing with both hands toward the west, eyes wide as cannonballs. Sail! Big one, full colours. Craig barrels onto the deck shirtless, a piece of sausage in one hand, spyglass in the other. He scans the horizon and freezes mid-bite. Then he shouts the 3 words no pirate ever wants to hear. King's Navy, frigate, close, that's it. The dread spreads like fire. You drop your half-sucked hardtack and run to the rail. You see it too now, an enormous silhouette cresting the blue. Sharp sails, gleaming hull, order, discipline, violence. It's not just a ship, it's a symbol, a floating gallows with cannon ports, and it's headed straight for you. Orders get screamed. Crag throws on a coat, the wrong one, with a rip in the back and bloodstains down the sleeve. The helmsman spins the wheel so hard it squeals. Sailors scramble to adjust rigging, tie ropes, prep the cannons, though half of them don't even work and one is still being used to store potatoes. You're handed a musket that doesn't fire and a knife with no handle. Great. Maybe you'll throw insults. Maybe you'll just jump. The Navy ship gains on you quickly. Of course it does. You're in a patched-together garbage scow limping along on desperation and bad maps. They're in a fully equipped war machine with rows of shining brass and sails that actually match. Within the hour, they're close enough that you can see the officers on deck, pristine in their coats, scanning you like a hunter might scan a wounded deer. They don't open fire, not yet. They want you to surrender. You can feel it. The quiet confidence, the ease with which they match your every turn. They know this dance. They've done it 100 times. Catch the pirates. Board hang half. Send the rest to rot in some coastal prison where the rats wear uniforms. Craig, of course, has other ideas. Raise the black, he shouts. Someone raises the pirate flag, ragged, hand-stitched and featuring a skull that looks more like a confused potato. But it flaps in the wind, and suddenly there's a new energy in the crew. Maybe it's madness, maybe it's pride. Maybe it's just the knowledge that if you're going to die, you might as well do it looking cool. Then Crag pulls out a torch. We're not letting them have the ship, he says, lighting it. If they want it, they'll have to take it on fire. And that's when you realise Crag has finally lost the last of his mind. He's planning to light the gunpowder magazine, not just to blow the ship if boarded, but preemptively, to create a smokescreen while trying to escape. Which would be insane even if the gunpowder wasn't damp, the fuse wasn't made of seaweed, and the crew wasn't already half dead from starvation. Still, it almost works. The torch hits the powder barrel and belches out a choking cloud of black smoke. The cannons miraculously fire. 3 of them, anyway. One flips completely over, one just backfires and sets Gristle's shirt ablaze. He runs in circles, slapping at himself with a potato sack. The Navy ship pauses, adjusting course to avoid what they think might be a more competent resistance than expected. That pause saves your life. Crag takes the wheel and pulls a wild turn, the sails snapping. The ship groans under the strain, but it turns. Fast. The wind catches the patchwork sails, and suddenly, against all odds, you're moving. Fast. You lurch across the deck, grabbing rope, dodging crates, trying to stay upright as the ship begins a full, desperate sprint across the waves. Behind you, the Navy frigate adjusts slowly at first, less nimble, heavier, but persistent. It becomes a chase. One ship, burning from its own dumb sabotage, fleeing across an empty sea. The other, fresh, polished, determined to drag you back in chains. You don't eat that day, you barely drink. You run, climb, adjust sails, bail water, and pray. You don't know who you're praying to. The sea, Neptune, a ghost in the hull, doesn't matter. Crag starts singing halfway through the day, a sea shanty no one knows made up on the spot. The crew joins in, half from terror, half from sheer delirium. You sing too. You scream into the wind and feel your lungs stretch like they haven't in weeks. Somehow by dusk the Navy ship is smaller in the distance. It's fading. You're pulling away. You're winning? You collapse near the mainmast, chest heaving, hands raw. Around you, the crew is too tired to celebrate. Crag stands at the bow, arms out, coat flapping, declaring victory over Her Majesty's floating turd bucket. Someone throws a mouldy apple at him. He doesn't notice. Here's your historical fact. Pirate ships did sometimes outrun Navy frigates. Despite being better armed, the larger ships were heavier and less agile. Pirate vessels, often stripped down for speed, could use clever navigation and sheer audacity to escape. Not always, but sometimes. Your quirky fact. Pirates often use smoke and strange tactics to confuse their enemies, firing random weapons, setting fires, even throwing lit gunpowder kegs overboard to mimic cannon fire. One infamous crew once dressed as women to lure in a ship, then opened fire mid-curtsy. And the scholarly debate, were Navy ships truly better than pirate vessels? On paper, yes. In practice, it depended on leadership, speed, and luck. Some pirate ships were marvels of efficiency and terror. Others were held together by faith and fungus. The truth is, in open sea combat, planning was useful. But madness was survival. That night you lie on the deck instead of your hammock, watching the stars blink into view. Your shirt is singed, your muscles ache, your ears are still ringing, but the Navy is gone, and you're still here. For now. By morning, the adrenaline has dried up, leaving everyone brittle and bruised like driftwood pretending to be people. The ship creaks as it limps across the water, slower now, sails flapping like tired lungs. The sun is high, but the celebration is low. You outran the Navy. You survived. That should count for something. But all it means, really, is that you get to go back to being exhausted, hungry, itchy, and surrounded by men who've lost track of how long they've been wearing the same shirt. Crag announces you're nearing Nassau. You've heard that name before, usually whispered with a mix of reverence and disgust, like it's both a temple and a toilet. The Pirate Republic, they call it. A place where no king rules, no navy meddles, and no law reaches unless it brings rum. Supposedly it's where pirates are free to be pirates, openly, loudly, and unapologetically. You've been at sea for so long now that any dock feels like a mirage, but Nassau, that's a full-blown fever dream. By midday, land rises like a promise on the horizon, a smear of green against a backdrop of endless blue. The crew stirs. Crag hums a waltz off key. Even the rats seem a little perkier. Someone finds a clean sock. Hope, like mildew, spreads fast. The harbour's chaotic, choked with every kind of vessel you can imagine. Sloops, brigantines, patched-up hulks barely afloat, and one ship that appears to be on fire just for the ambience. Flags from a dozen nations hang like tattered decorations, most of them false, all of them stolen. The air smells like fish, smoke, and something spicy that could be food or could be someone's foot wrapped in a banana leaf. Docking is an ordeal. Cragg insists on doing it himself. He ends up crashing into another ship and then arguing loudly with its captain about who has right of drift. While they shout, you tie up the ropes and pray the mast doesn't fall off. Again. As soon as the gangplank is down, the crew pours onto the dock like a flood of lice and desperation. You follow, careful not to lose your footing. Nassau doesn't feel like a place that forgives clumsiness. The first thing that hits you is the noise. Shouting, laughing, singing, glass breaking, boots stomping. The second thing is the heat. The island doesn't just bake you. It wraps you in damp air and squeezes. You're sweating before your second step. The town itself looks like it was built by drunk architects with a grudge against symmetry. Buildings lean in strange directions. Rooftops sag. Everything is sun-faded and patched with tar, rope or optimism. Chickens run wild in the street. You pass a man selling what he claims are authentic voodoo curses in decorative jars. You don't make eye contact. You and a few crewmates head to the nearest tavern, which has a sign hanging sideways that reads The Drowned Wench. Inside, it's dim, smoky and loud, the pirate trifecta. A woman behind the bar pours drinks with one hand and threatens patrons with the other. The floor is sticky, the air is worse. You've never been happier. You order something brown and burning. It tastes like varnish and regret. It's amazing. You follow it with a plate of mystery meat and something green that might once have been a vegetable. You don't ask. You eat it all. It's the first hot meal that hasn't come out of a barrel in weeks. Around you, pirates drink, gamble, argue, sing. It's a free-for-all. No uniforms, no hierarchy, no crag looming overhead. Just people who've made peace with chaos and call it home. You hear snippets of wild stories. A man who claims he rode a dolphin to Cuba, another who insists he's immune to bullets, and one particularly sunburnt sailor who swears he ate an entire mermaid and got cursed with eternal gas. Outside, Nassau swells with life. Markets overflow with stolen goods, silverware, rum, weapons, and clothing that was clearly not made for anyone on this island. You see women and men offering services both professional and deeply unprofessional. Children dart between stalls like rats with better teeth. And everywhere, gold. Fake, real, melted, traded. The whole town breathes in coin and spits out ruin. Cragg disappears within the hour, presumably to do captain business, which probably means losing money and dignity in equal measure. You see him later on a balcony, singing at a window like a drunk Romeo. A boot sails out and hits him in the head. He bows. You spend the day restocking supplies, drinking, and trying not to get pickpocketed. You fail once, but steal your coin back 2 hours later. By sundown, the crew is scattered. Some are passed out in gutters, some are gambling, some are probably starting families with people they just met. The ship, forgotten, rocks gently in the harbour, half looted and already starting to stink again. And you? You sit on the beach, toes in the sand, sipping the least offensive drink you've had in months. The stars come out, and for the first time since this whole wretched journey began, you feel almost human. Here's your historical fact. Nassau truly was a pirate republic in the early 1700s. At its peak, it was home to hundreds of pirates, including famous names like Blackbeard and Charles Vane. The island operated outside traditional colonial law for years, becoming a haven for fugitives, privateers, and outright lunatics. Your quirky fact. Nassau once tried to form a legitimate pirate government. They elected a governor, issued something like laws, and even attempted taxes. It lasted about as long as a drunk duel. Eventually the British cleaned it up, but for a few glorious years it was real. And the scholarly debate. Was Nassau a utopia for freedom seekers, or just another lawless mess? Some historians argue it was an early experiment in democracy and self-rule. Others say it was just another den of thieves with better branding. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere between the rum barrels and the vomit in the street. That night you don't sleep in your hammock, you sleep in a bed, a real one, with a mattress and sheets. Sure, the mattress smells like rum and someone else's bad choices, but it's soft. You lie back, stare at the wooden ceiling, and try to pretend you're not a pirate. Not anymore. Just a tired, sunburned human in a pirate town that's about to burn itself down again. But not tonight. Tonight is quiet. You wake up to the unmistakable sensation of something biting your ankle. Not nipping, not tickling, biting. You sit up fast, knocking your head against the low wooden beam above the bed. Groaning, you kick the blanket aside and find a large cockroach staggering across your foot like it just lost a bar fight. It's missing 2 legs. It glares at you and scuttles off. You don't scream because after everything you've been through, a half-dead roach with a grudge barely ranks on the panic scale. You're in Nassau. Still. The sun's already up, and the room you slept in, above the Drowned Wench Tavern, smells like dried vomit, old rum, and secrets. The sheets are tangled. Your boots are missing. One is under the bed. The other, being worn by a passed-out man near the door who may or may not be alive. You slip out of bed and immediately regret it. Your stomach churns. Your head feels like a drum someone's using for target practice. You're sticky, in places that don't make sense. You shuffle to the window and throw open the shutters. Outside, Nassau is already wide awake and deeply hungover. Pirates stagger through alleys. Merchants shout about coconuts and knives. Someone's sword fighting with a broomstick. A child runs past holding what looks like a severed pig's tail. The town has that peculiar morning after glow. A place that partied too hard and isn't sorry. You splash water on your face and decide it's time to leave. You've had your rest, you've had your drink, you've had whatever else happened last night. It's time to get back to sea, at least out there. The food's bad, but you don't wake up with bite marks and existential dread. You find most of the crew slumped around the harbour. One man's playing cards with a parrot, another is vomiting into his hat. Gristle is curled in a net, cradling a bottle like it's a newborn. You step over someone you vaguely recognise as having threatened to kill you last month. He's singing a lullaby in Dutch. Probably fine. But Crag. Crag is missing. No one's seen him since he leapt off the balcony last night yelling, "I am the sea!" and landed headfirst in a fruit cart. You spend the morning searching, tavern to tavern, alley to alley. You check the brothel, the bakery, which doubles as a brothel, the gambling hall, and a place called the Wet Skull, which serves drinks out of actual skulls and has a strict no-questions policy. Nothing. Then finally you find him, half submerged in a tide pool talking to a crab. He's naked except for a belt and one sock. His beard is crusted with sand and there's a tiny starfish clinging to his chest like a badge of honour. You approach cautiously. "Crag," you say. He looks up at you, eyes wild, one hand cradling the crab like a pet. "This is Admiral Pinchbottom," he says. "He's helping me map the future." You consider turning around and pretending this never happened, but unfortunately Crag is your captain, and more unfortunately you still need him to get off this cursed island. You coax him out of the tide pool with a half-dried mango and a promise of rum. You get him dressed. Well, you find pants and a coat, and drag him back to the dock. The rest of the crew, having sobered up just enough to regret most of their life choices, gathers around. You declare in the most authoritative voice you can muster, "We're leaving." A few cheers, mostly groans. Someone asks if Admiral Pinchbottom is coming. Crag insists he's now first mate. By midday, the crew is back aboard. Supplies are loaded. The sails are patched again, and the deck has been hosed down enough to be technically walkable. As the anchor is hauled up and the ship pulls away from Nassau, you glance back at the island, and you realise something. Nassau isn't a home, it's a mirror. A bloated, sun-drenched reflection of what pirate life really is. Chaotic, broken, absurd. No glory, just grit. No legends, just losers who drink like kings and die like dogs. You survived it, barely, but you're also dragging it with you. Here's your historical fact. Nassau was not just a pirate republic, it was also a hotbed of disease, violence, and political tension. Pirates may have ruled it for a few years, but it was constantly under threat by the British Crown, by rival factions, and by the pirates themselves, who couldn't agree on anything for more than 5 minutes. Your quirky fact. The Bahamas had a short-lived pirate king, a self-proclaimed title held by a man named Benjamin Hornigold, who supposedly enforced pirate codes and banned attacking English ships. He was eventually overthrown by other pirates who just wanted to be pirates, no politics attached. And your scholarly debate. Was Nassau's fall inevitable? Some argue that the pirate experiment could have evolved into a stable society if it had been better organised. Others believe the very nature of piracy, rootless, violent, self-serving, meant it could never last. In the end, the British took it back, cleaned it up and rewrote the story. Back on the ship, the crew settles into familiar roles. Swabbing, climbing, swearing. Dagger Pete is back to sharpening his butter knife. Gristle is cooking something you're pretty sure includes seaweed and regret. The ship creaks forward, leaving the pirate paradise behind. Craig stands at the helm, bare-chested again, the crab now perched proudly on his shoulder. He's humming, or maybe it's singing, something about treasure and teeth. You find your hammock. It's still damp, still infested, still yours. You lie down, clutch your copper coin and close your eyes. Nassau is behind you, the sea is ahead. And you're not free, but you're still afloat. A week at sea and it all comes creeping back, the rot, the routine, the slow unravelling of sanity like a spool tossed overboard. Nassau fades into memory, like a wild dream that never quite made sense. The sea has you again. It always does. It waits, patient and salty, ready to remind you that there's no such thing as a clean break when you're a pirate. There's just forward. And forward is looking rough. The wind's turned fickle, the sails hang slack one day, then snap with fury the next. The sky flips moods like a drunk gambler. Sun one hour, thunder the next. And with every shift in weather, the crew turns more restless. Too many days without land, without loot, without a target. You've slipped from mission to drift, and the boredom is doing worse things to people than hunger ever did. Craig claims he's following the stars. He consults Admiral Pinchbottom daily, gently turning the crab in his palm like it's a compass made of anxiety. He mumbles to himself, starts talking to the ship, petting the wheel. Once you catch him whispering a lullaby to the mainsail. No one questions it anymore. You spend your days in a fog of chores and dehydration, swabbing, climbing, patching, fixing what shouldn't break but always does. You haven't had a dry meal in 3 days. The rain won't stop but the barrels still run low. It's like the ocean's taunting you with water you can't drink. A few crewmen try catching rain in their hats. One drinks from a puddle on deck and immediately regrets it. Then someone spots something on the horizon. You're in the rigging when the cry goes up. Ship ahead, stern side. You grab your spyglass, wiping salt and grime from the lens and squint into the distance. There it is, a faint shape on the waves. No flag visible. Small, fast, alone. Could be a merchant vessel. Could be bait. Could be a ghost. Crag appears beside you, climbing the rigging with a grace that's frankly upsetting. He squints, then grins. There she is, he says, like it's a long-lost lover. Rich and ripe, I can feel it in my... He pauses, rubs his belly and burps. Gut. The crew snaps into motion. Finally purpose, target locked. The boredom breaks like a fever, sails tighten, cannons get loaded, or at least dusted off and politely threaten to behave. Dagger Pete sharpens his knife for the 8th time, still unaware it's just a butter knife with ambition. You close the distance fast. Your ship might be cursed, infested, and held together with rope and lies, but it's fast. The sea cooperates for once, and the wind fills your sails with something close to hope. As you near the vessel, it becomes clear. It's a merchant brig, low in the water, heavy with cargo. No escort, no flags, no warning. It might as well have a sign nailed to the mast that says, "Please rob us." "Thank you." Crag lets out a joyful whoop. "Brace to board," he cries, brandishing a pistol that hasn't worked since the last mutiny. You ready yourself. Hands on the rail, rope at your hip, blade sheathed but loose. You feel that familiar buzz in your teeth, the mix of fear and fire, of not knowing if this next minute will be your last or your luckiest. Then, a single cannon shot booms across the sea, not from your ship, from theirs. You duck instinctively, heart slamming into your ribs. Everyone freezes. A few men drop their weapons. The cannonball splashes into the water far short, but the message is clear. They're not helpless. A second shot follows, closer this time. The merchant ship is armed, and by the looks of the coordinated movement on their deck, they're trained. The way their sails shift, the smoothness of their turn. They're not merchants at all, and it's bait. Crag doesn't hesitate. "It's a trap," he shouts gleefully, as if that's great news. "Let's spring it." You want to scream, or maybe dive overboard, but there's no time. The third shot hits your stern, splintering wood, and sending 2 men flying. You grab rope, swing across the deck, shouting warnings no one hears. The crew panics. Some run for the guns, others run for cover. Someone starts singing a hymn. Gristle grabs a frying pan and takes cover behind a barrel, swearing at the sky. You brace for impact as the enemy ship swings wide, lining up a broadside. And then, miracle or madness, Crag turns the wheel hard, pulling a risky manoeuvre that swings your ship just out of the line of fire. The cannonballs whistle past, close enough to feel. You hold your breath. The enemy overshoots. Your ship lurches forward, cutting across their stern. It's not enough to escape. Not yet. But you're buying space. Buying time. The crew regroups. Somehow. Even Dagger Pete finds his footing. You load one working cannon and fire it. Probably by accident. But it hits. Barely. Enough to shout about. The chase is on. For hours the ships dance. You're not faster, but you're lighter, slippery. You cut across wind and current, zigzagging like a lunatic. It works. They fall behind. By nightfall, the enemy ship is just a smear on the horizon. You've made it. Barely. Crag stands at the helm, grinning like a lunatic, his coat flapping in the breeze. She was beautiful, he sighs. We should have died. No one laughs. Here's your historical fact. Pirate ships were often mistaken for merchant vessels, and vice versa. Deception was common. Merchant ships disguised themselves as weak to lure pirates, while pirates disguised themselves as merchants to sneak up on targets. The sea was one long game of lies, your quirky fact. Some pirates flew multiple flags, starting with false national colours to get close, then switching to the Jolly Roger at the last second to strike terror. One notorious captain flew a white flag, then a red one, then the skull, all in under 5 minutes. Very dramatic, very illegal, and the scholarly debate. Did pirates fear these traps more than they feared the navy? Some accounts suggest yes. The unpredictability of merchant deception made it harder to trust a target. You could plan for warships, but a wolf in merchant's wool? That could gut a crew before they even knew they'd made a mistake. That night, no one sleeps. You lie in your hammock, wide-eyed, still tasting salt and smoke. The ship is silent except for the wind and the occasional groan of strained wood. You stare at the ceiling and wonder how many traps are still out there waiting. You didn't find treasure today, you didn't win a battle, you just got away. And in pirate life, that's more than enough. You wake to the sound of chewing, not polite chewing, not someone found a biscuit chewing. No, wet, slow, uncomfortably rhythmic chewing. You open one eye, then the other, and peer into the gloom of the hold. Crag is sitting on a crate, shirtless again, biting into what appears to be a raw onion. He's smiling. His teeth are purple. You pretend to be asleep until he wanders off, humming a lullaby about a blood moon rising. So, that's how today starts. You drag yourself onto the deck and blink against the harsh light. The sun is sharp, too bright, too yellow. The ocean is calm, too calm. There's no wind, no waves, not even a gull. It's like the sea's holding its breath. The crew is sluggish, scattered, and slightly sunburned. No one speaks. Everyone knows what this is. Dead calm. You've hit one of those cruel pockets in the middle of the ocean where the wind vanishes and the ship just sits. No sails billowing, no forward motion, just a heavy, dragging silence. You could be floating in the sky for how motionless everything feels. Even the ropes hang limp. This is worse than storms, worse than cannon fire, because there's nothing to fight, no action to take, just heat, stillness, and time stretching like taffy. Every creak of the hull is like a drumbeat for madness. You feel your thoughts fray. Crag leans over the rail and whispers to the ocean. You hope he's talking to fish. You're afraid he's not. By midday, the crew starts snapping. Gristle throws a bucket at a gull that isn't there. Dagger Pete insists he saw land on the horizon, then points at the sun. A man named Webb claims the ship is moving, just very, very slowly, then vomits over the side from heat stroke. You find shade under a sail and sip warm, bitter water. It tastes like copper and mould. The barrels are low again. You've rationed so tightly that half the crew's tongues look like dried up worms. Crag insists it's character building. Someone else insists Crag should be thrown overboard. That person hasn't been seen since yesterday. No one wants to talk about it. You catch yourself tracing the planks with your finger just to have something to do. 1, 2, 3. The same 3 you counted this morning. You hum quietly, an old song from a life you barely remember. The man beside you weeps softly into his shirt. The boredom becomes oppressive. Pirates aren't built for this. You're supposed to be pillaging, drinking, dodging death. not drifting under a merciless sky like forgotten laundry. Crag calls another meeting. That's when you know it's serious. He stands on a barrel and declares, "The sea has tested us. It has found us wanting." Then he reads what he claims is a sea poem passed down from Poseidon himself. It's mostly him rhyming wave with brave and grave. You stop listening, then comes the vote. Yes, an actual vote. Crag announces he will allow the crew to decide their own fate. Options. 1. Lighten the ship by throwing unnecessary weight overboard, including duplicate clothing items and untrustworthy personalities. 2. Attempt a rain dance, which he offers to lead. 3. Sacrifice something to the sea to show we still believe. You vote for the dance, you don't even know why. Probably delirium. So that night, under a sky that looks like scorched parchment, Crag dances. Shirtless, of course. He leaps, twirls, shouts at the clouds. A few others join in. One man plays a drum made from an empty barrel and a spoon. It's the saddest, weirdest ritual you've ever seen. And then, because the universe has a dark sense of humour, it works. A breeze picks up. Just a whisper at first, like the sea's laughing at you. Then stronger. The sails twitch, then billow. The ship groans like it's waking up. The crew goes quiet, listening to the air as if it might vanish again. It doesn't. You move, forward. The stillness breaks. Someone cries. Someone else kisses the deck. You just close your eyes and feel the breeze on your face. It smells like salt, distant rain, and rotten onions. Crag is still eating them. But it's wind. Real wind. You survive the calm. Barely. Here's your historical fact. The doldrums, or intertropical convergence zone, is a real place, an area near the equator known for unpredictable wind patterns and long periods of dead calm. In the age of sail, ships could be stuck for weeks, completely at the mercy of weather and superstition. Your quirky fact. Sailors used to blame dead calm on bad luck, curses, or even unhappy ghosts aboard. Some captains ordered musical performances, sacrifices of livestock, or symbolic gestures to appease the sea. One infamous case involved a man painting his beard blue and standing naked on the bow. It reportedly didn't work, and your scholarly debate. Did these calms truly drive crews mad, or were the stories exaggerated? Some historians believe the psychological effects of dead calm were very real. Starvation, thirst, heat stroke, hallucinations. Others say it was the idea of being trapped, powerless and drifting, that broke people more than the conditions themselves. The next day, you make good time. The breeze holds. The ship creaks. Yes, but it moves. And movement, out here, is life. No one talks about what happened during the calm, the vanished crewmate, the hallucinations, the weird poetry. You all pretend it was just a long nap, a heat-induced blur. Crag insists the crab performed the dance, not him. No one corrects him. That night, you lie in your hammock listening to the rhythmic slap of water against the hull. You feel the breeze moving through the ship, lifting the sails, pulling you away from the stillness. You survived another nothing, which might be the most dangerous thing of all. The wind holds. The sea stays kind. For the first time in, well, forever, things almost feel normal aboard the ship. Not good, but not actively trying to kill you either. It's suspicious. Like the ocean's waiting for the perfect moment to throw you overboard emotionally instead of physically. The crew settles into something dangerously close to a routine. You wake. You eat something questionably edible. You scrub something stained. You check the rigging. You scan the horizon. You climb. You sweat. You curse. Repeat. Crag spends most of his time in the captain's quarters now, writing what he calls the epic of me. Every so often he steps outside to shout things like, "I'll title this chapter Whispers of Thunder," or, which sounds better, Crimson Destiny or Goreful Embrace. No one answers him anymore. Admiral Pinchbottom the Crab has become an official member of the crew, now with his own tiny hammock nailed to the corner of Crag's desk. There are arguments over whether he should get a share of the next loot. You're not joking, but after days of quiet sailing, the boredom starts biting again, and that's when the sickness creeps in. It starts subtly. A cough here, a pale face there. Someone sleeping longer than they should. You ignore it, because you've learned that noticing things gets you involved, and involvement gets you cursed, stabbed, or both. But by the third day, it's clear something's wrong. Gristle is the first to collapse. 1 minute he's ladling out breakfast stew, mostly brine and whatever's growing on the potatoes. The next, he's face down in the bowl, drooling. He wakes up shivering, mumbling about eyes in the dark. His skin is clammy. His breath smells like fermented boots. He swears he saw his own mother standing in the water calling to him. No one questions it, mostly because everyone else starts seeing things too. Dagger Pete stares into a bucket for hours, convinced it's whispering to him. Webb starts covering every reflective surface on the ship, claiming he saw a man with no face staring back at him from the mirror in the captain's wash basin. Even Craig looks shaken. He stops writing, starts pacing, forgets to wear pants. You, of course, assume the worst: scurvy, or typhus, or sea madness, or the ghost of the last crew member Crag fed to the ocean. But when you finally corner someone with a working brain, a sailor named Finn who used to be a surgeon's apprentice, he offers a different theory. It's the breadfruit, he says. What breadfruit, you ask? He leads you to the barrel of preserved supplies loaded back in Nassau. Sure enough, there's a netted pile of strange fruit, spiky, green, suspiciously spongy. They were cheap, they were abundant, they were also, as it turns out, slightly spoiled. And mildly hallucinogenic, Finn adds, helpfully. You all stare at the breadfruit. It stares back. By the end of the day, a third of the crew is sick. Not dying, just unwell in that vague, feverish, emotionally fragile way that pirates are when they think death might be taking notes. Crag calls for a spiritual purge, which involves throwing the remaining breadfruit overboard and dancing on the deck shirtless in a thunderstorm. The dancing doesn't help, but the storm does. Rain pours for hours, pounding the deck, drenching everything, flushing the sick sweat stink away. You collect fresh water in buckets and hats and mouths. The crew rallies, sort of. Everyone still looks haunted, but slightly less haunted. A few hallucinate good things now: gold, old lovers, the feeling of being hugged by someone who isn't covered in sea lice. By dawn, the worst of it passes. The hallucinations fade. Gristle returns to making stew. Pete stops asking the bucket for advice. Crag reclaims his pants and declares Admiral Pinchbottom to be fully exercised. You don't know what that means. You don't ask. You're left with a strange quiet. Not the dead calm kind. A thoughtful kind. The ship glides forward. The crew slower now, a little softer. Something about facing invisible horrors together has shaken something loose in them. The shouting dies down. People stop fighting over rope coils and scraps of soap. They even clean, just a little. You sit on the deck that night and think about all the things that have tried to kill you. The sea, the storms, the navy, the hunger, the boredom, the captain, the hallucinations, the breadfruit. Somehow you're still breathing. Here's your historical fact. Sailors in the age of sail often suffered from diseases like scurvy, dysentery and typhus, which could decimate a crew. Poor hygiene, limited nutrition, and cramped quarters made ships perfect breeding grounds for illness. Many pirates died not in battle but in hammocks, delirious and forgotten. Your quirky fact. There were pirate ships that employed their own version of medical officers, often former barbers, butchers, or people who just owned a knife and a calm voice. One ship reportedly had a doctor who swore by using leeches and rum for every ailment. The leeches lived longer than most patients, and your scholarly debate. Did pirate crews maintain better health than navy ships because of their democracy and flexibility? Or worse, health because of their lawlessness and poor discipline? Some argue that pirates had better rations, rest and freedom, which led to stronger bodies. Others believe their chaotic lives and lack of structure meant they were one sneeze away from total collapse. By the time the sun sets, the crew is quiet. Some are still recovering, some are sleeping early. Crag is muttering about sea ghosts, but seems calmer. You lie in your hammock, no longer swaying from hallucinations but from the motion of the ship. You whisper to the ceiling, "Not today, breadfruit." And sleep comes quickly. Tomorrow might bring another horror. But tonight, you live. The birds are the first warning. You spot them on the horizon early, circling low and slow, a lazy loop of black specks against the blue. Gulls, mostly. A few frigates. One suspiciously large vulture-looking thing that nobody wants to name aloud. You know enough by now to take birds seriously. Birds mean land. Birds mean ships. Birds mean something died. As the ship coasts closer, the smell finds you. Thick, oily, sour. Death mixed with brine. The air goes heavy like it's trying to warn you off. You don't listen. You never do. You're the first to see the wreck. It's a merchant vessel, or it was. Now it's a twisted mass of splintered beams and half-sunk hopes. Its mainmast is snapped like a matchstick. The hull is torn open on one side, the ribs of the ship showing like bones poking through flesh. Sailcloth flaps in the wind, tattered and useless. There's no flag, no crew on deck. Just the slow, listless rocking of something that should be still. Cragg appears beside you, chewing a bit of jerky that might be older than some nations. He squints at the wreck, then mutters, "Dead, but not empty." That's all it takes. He orders the longboat lowered. Half the crew refuses to go, some feign illness. Others just stare at the wreck like it's a floating curse. You go. Not because you're brave, but because you've stopped expecting good choices to keep you alive. You, Craig, Dagger Pete, and 3 others row out in silence. Up close, the wreck looks worse. The hull bears scorch marks. The railings are peppered with bullet holes. Blood stains the deck in long, dry streaks. No bodies, though. That's the most unsettling part. A massacre with no corpses. Just the smell of rot and absence. Cragg boards first, climbing the shattered rail with the confidence of a man who's never once paid for consequences. The rest of you follow, stepping lightly over splinters, eyes scanning every shadow. You're hoping for treasure, fearing traps, and fully expecting ghosts. Below deck, it's worse. The cargo hold is a ruin. Crates smashed open, barrels split, sacks torn apart like something clawed through them. There's sugar spilled everywhere, soaked into the floorboards and crawling with ants. You find a few empty strongboxes. Someone opened them cleanly. This wasn't desperation. It was professional. In the captain's quarters you find a journal. It's waterlogged. Half the pages smeared to nothing, but you make out a few lines. Attacked at dawn, no flag, masked men, too fast, took everything, left nothing. They smiled as they boarded. One whistled. Never seen such precision. Not pirates, something else. Craig reads it aloud, then chuckles. Artists, he says. Real professionals. You don't find any treasure, not even scraps. It's all been taken, stripped, cleaned. You wonder who would bother hitting a merchant ship with such efficiency. Not for revenge, not for chaos, just harvest. Then you find the hatch. It's wedged shut, nailed from the outside. Cragg pries it open with the back of his pistol. The wood creaks. A thick smell rolls out. Worse than before, not just rot, decay mixed with iron and something sour. Inside are the bodies, 5 of them, stacked like cordwood, tied at the wrists, bullet wounds in the head, all lined up, blindfold still on, execution style. Even Craig goes silent. No one speaks for a long time. Then Dagger Pete asks too quietly, "Why blindfold them?" Craig says, "So they wouldn't see it coming." You row back in silence. The longboat feels heavier, though you brought nothing with you, not even supplies. Cragg keeps the journal. No one argues. Back aboard, the crew senses the shift. You all move slower, talk less. That night, no one drinks. Even the parrot says nothing. You lie in your hammock, staring up at the beams. You think about the empty ship, the blindfolds, the whistling. You faced madness, hunger, ghosts, and Cragg's dance moves. But this is worse, because it makes sense. Someone out there is doing this with purpose, with rules, with practice. And that makes them more terrifying than any screaming lunatic with a cutlass. Here's your historical fact. Not all sea attacks were pirate raids. Some were carried out by privateers, mercenaries, or rogue naval factions with political motives. These groups often operated under secret orders or false flags, hitting specific targets with surgical brutality. Your quirky fact. Some pirate crews, fearing cursed ships, would refuse to loot vessels that showed signs of a ritual death, especially those with bound corpses or strange symbols. One notorious captain once burned an entire captured ship at sea, rather than risk bringing death ghosts aboard. Superstition had the final word, and the scholarly debate. Were these organised attacks a form of early maritime warfare, or simply piracy wearing a better suit? Some argue they were pre-modern intelligence operations, targeted strikes meant to send messages. Others say the line between pirate and privateer was always blurred. Motives didn't matter much to the dead. Craig doesn't sleep that night. He stands at the rail, muttering about clean blades and perfect knots. You watch him from your hammock, half awake, fingering the copper coin in your pocket like it's a charm against whatever you just saw. The sea is quiet. Too quiet. You survived the wreck, but something else is hunting these waters, and you know, deep in your belly, that your turn is coming. And so, this horrible little voyage comes to its slow, salty end. You're still alive, which is impressive considering the odds, the crew, the questionable stew, and the fact that you once used a wet rope as a pillow. You've seen things no sailor, or landlubber, or remotely sane human should see. Floating wrecks, Captain Cragg's bare chest, Dagger Pete's dreams of knife glory, sickness, storms, betrayal, fake treasure, possibly haunted breadfruit, and at least 2 situations that would qualify as war crimes if the sea had a courtroom. The ship, still floating, miraculously. You don't know how it's not at the bottom of the ocean, but you stopped questioning logic somewhere around the part where a crab got promoted to first mate. What started as an idea, freedom, gold, adventure, became something else entirely. You didn't find treasure, at least not the shiny kind, but you found out what pirates were really like. The smells, the hunger, the noise, the ever-present risk of death by accident, violence, or bad leadership. You wouldn't survive it. Honestly, barely anyone did. History loves to dress them up, make pirates into charming rogues with witty lines and shiny earrings. But under the glamour, the real pirate life was a long, damp grind with disease in every barrel and betrayal in every smile, and you lived it. All of it. Now, the ship drifts gently into darkness, the stars bright above, the sea calm below. Cragg hums something off-key at the helm. The parrot mutters in its sleep. The wind carries the scent of salt and wood smoke. You close your eyes, your body sways with the waves, and for the first time in a long, long while, you rest.